Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump says the U.S. in the final stages of negotiating with Iran. Why he says he's willing to wait. And the latest on the U.S. naval blockade as U.S. Marines board an Iranian tanker. President Trump describing murder charges against former Cuban regime leader Raul Castro as a big moment for the Cuban people, saying U.S. actions involving Cuba are one of the biggest things his administration has done. A former prosecutor is charged with stealing sensitive records. The case is tied to special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into President Trump. SpaceX announcing plans to go public in the U.S., allowing investors to trade shares of the company on the stock market. The move could make Elon Musk the world's first trillionaire.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Thursday, May 21st. I'm Kevin Hogan. The Trump administration refreshing threats against Iran while giving the regime a window to respond to a peace proposal. It comes as the U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz remains in full effect. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good morning, Iris. What's the latest?
Good morning to you as well, Kevin. So Iran's government is now reportedly reviewing a latest U.S. proposal for a potential peace plan. Meanwhile, President Trump is saying that first, they're in the final stages now of negotiating with Iran, also adding that he's not in a hurry to make a deal as he wants the best results. Watch.
I'm in no hurry. You never think, oh, the midterms, I'm in a hurry. I'm in no hurry. Ideally, I'd like to see few people killed, as opposed to a lot. We can do it either way, but I'd like to see few people killed. There's a lot of anger now in Iran because people are living so badly. There's a lot of foment that we haven't seen before so much, and we'll see what happens.
Meanwhile, President Trump has repeatedly emphasized that a number one priority for him in a potential peace deal will be to make sure that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. He has also said that the U.S. must get the nuclear dust, as he puts it, out of Iran. The White House this morning pushing back on reporting that Iran's supreme leader has said that the uranium must stay inside Iran. Of course, it also comes as specific terms are still under negotiations and being planned out by this Trump administration. Meanwhile, Americans feeling the increase in gas prices, especially as many Americans are heading out over Memorial Day weekend. Right now, today, the average gas prices across the U.S. is sitting at $4.56. That coming as President Trump says the prices of gas will drop like a rock once the conflict is over in Iran. He's also saying that he is waiting for, quote, a couple of days, giving that breathing room for negotiations to play out with Iran, as he says, the good results will save not only time and energy, but also lives. Watch.
If I can save war by waiting a couple of days, if I can save people being killed by waiting a couple of days, I think it's a great thing to do.
And as President Trump is enacting this ceasefire with Iran to give more room for negotiation and talks, a U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz against Iranian ports remains in full effect. Central Command announcing the latest action, saying that U.S. Marines boarded Iranian tanker that tried to breach the blockade in the latest enforcement of that naval action. Central Command also sharing footage on X showing how the Marines taken off from U.S. warships and helicopters approaching the Iranian tanker and ultimately lowering onto the deck of that commercial ship. It comes as the Trump administration saying that they have now redirected over 91 ships since the start of the blockade, and that a blockade remains a very powerful tool in sending a message to Iran that the U.S. has all of its cards. Let's take a look.
And now with this embargo, President Trump has demonstrated at any point in time, if Iran tries to interfere with global commerce, America can shut Iran down. So we have all the cards, we have all the power, we have all the decision-making space, so it's up to Iran.
And this week, both President Trump and War Secretary Pete Hegseth emphasizing that the U.S. remains locked and loaded. Kevin.
Yes, such a fascinating roundup, Iris. And in response to what you're saying, President Trump, like we saw, his demands, no nukes, open the strait. From one of the recent proposals I've seen from Iran, diametrically opposed. Iran wants war reparations, and they also want to enrich uranium. And meanwhile, they're working with Doha. They're in talks with Oman, actually, that is, to set up this permanent tolling system to secure their control over the strait. And what you said, gas prices, everyone wants them to come down. Besant is hopeful that if and when this conflict subsides, those gas prices will come down and Treasury yields will improve. And he's trying to, have Europe pressure the Iranian regime to, make them have a financial strain to put a little fire under their, under their butt, we'll say. So now, Iris, at the same time, President's making an expected announcement this hour about lowering grocery costs for Americans. Tell us more about this.
Sure. So in a bid to lower everyday costs for Americans, the president is expected to make an announcement with the EPA Administrator and this hour at 11 a.m. about rolling back Biden-era refrigerant rules that the White House tells NTD will save American families and business over $2.4 billion. And specifically, they say that it's going to do it through lower grocery prices and cheaper refrigerated transport and more affordable home AC. Specifically, the numbers include, for example, projected savings in over $900 million from fixing the 2023 technology transition rule, as well as up to $1.5 billion from transporters of refrigerated goods. They also say that it will protect over 350,000 highly skilled American jobs and also provide lower cost options for preserved that for homeowners AC repairments as well as for replacements. So of course, as the summer is hitting right now, a lot of options for Americans to turn on their ACs, and the Trump administration now saying that they're trying to lower costs for everyday Americans in all kinds of manners. The president expected to speak very soon. Kevin.
Well, affordability is the huge buzzword going into these midterms, and it seems from the success that the Trump-backed candidates have had that the Republican bloc feels that Trump's team can probably bring some resolution to that. Thank you for that report, Iris. And President Trump is reacting to murder charges filed against former Cuban regime leader Raul Castro. The president calling U.S. action toward the communist nation one of the most important steps his administration has taken. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more.
President Trump saying the indictment of Raul Castro was a long time coming.
I think it was a very big moment for people that, not only Cuban Americans, but people that came from Cuba, that want to go back to Cuba, people that want to see their family in Cuba.
The president calling Cuba a failing nation.
We're there to help. We're there to help the families, the people. And again, a lot of those people are related to me in the sense that I've had such a great relationship with Cuban Americans.
President Trump saying the U.S. has a lot of people in Cuba.
We had CIA there. We have Marco is there. Marco's parents, as you know, were from Cuba. So we have a lot of expertise in Cuba. And it's not going to be like the biggest thing we've ever done, but I will tell you, to a lot of people, it's going to be one of the most important. They've been looking for this moment for 65 years. So we'll see what happens.
The president downplaying any military action.
There won't be escalation. I don't think there needs to be. Look, the place is falling apart. It's a mess. And they've sort of lost control. They've really lost control of Cuba.
Federal prosecutors yesterday announcing charges against former Cuban President Raul Castro in the 1996 downing of civilian planes operated by Miami-based exiles.
For nearly 30 years, the families of 4 murdered Americans have waited for justice.
The indictment was related to Castro's alleged role in the shoot-down of 2 small planes operated by the exile group Brothers to the Rescue.
They were unarmed civilians and were flying humanitarian missions for the rescue and protection of people fleeing oppression across the Florida Straits.
Castro, now 94, was Cuba's defense minister at the time. The charges include murder and destruction of an airplane.
My message today is clear. The United States and President Trump does not and will not forget its citizens.
Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche saying the indictment isn't just for show.
So we expect that he will show up here by his own will or by another way.
After communist dictator Fidel Castro seized control of the island in 1959, Cubans began to flee in droves to the United States. The journey through the Florida Straits was a tough one, and refugees perished because ships became lost or capsized. The Miami-based organization Brothers to the Rescue was formed in 1991 to assist asylum seekers on their journey by guiding boats through the strait or rescuing those stranded at sea. The plane's unarmed Cessnas also conducted pro-democracy work such as dropping leaflets during protests. Cuba's government yesterday denied the allegations against Castro, calling them politically motivated and legally invalid. Secretary of State Marco Rubio appealing to the Cuban people to reject the country's communist leadership, saying President Trump is offering a path to a new Cuba.
Una nueva Cuba, donde ustedes.
A new Cuba where you, and not just the Communist Party of Cuba, can own a television station or a newspaper. A new Cuba where you can complain about a failing system without fear of going to jail or being forced to leave your island.
Ser forzado a irse de su isla.
Cubans in Miami celebrating charges against Castro, saying it's never too late for justice.
Today it has happened. We have an indictment of the man primarily responsible for the shootdown of the Brothers to the Rescue aircraft.
The Justice Department alleges the final orders to use deadly force against the Brothers to the Rescue flights came from Raul and Fidel Castro. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now heading out for a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Sweden. Here he is speaking to reporters before his departure.
Made that very clear.
What can the U.S. do for India? India has been deeply affected by the energy supply, the shutting of the Strait of Hormuz. Can the U.S. provide more energy itself, or what else can the U.S. do with that relationship?
Well, we want to sell them as much energy as they'll buy, and obviously you've seen, I think we're at historic levels of U.S. production and U.S. export. We want to be able to do more. We were already in talks with them to do more. We want that to be a bigger part of their portfolio. We also think there's opportunities with Venezuelan oil. In fact, it's my understanding that the interim president of Venezuela will be traveling to India next week as well. So there's opportunities. There's a lot to work on with India. They're a great ally, a great partner. We do a lot of good work with them. And so it is an important trip. I'm glad we're able to do it because I think there'll be a lot for us to talk about. And we'll also meet with the Quad there, which is important. It's something, I think my first meeting as Secretary of State was with the Quad. So I believe I got sworn in, I did the thing in the lobby, and then I went right upstairs, and that was my first meeting. And I'm glad we were able to do it now in India, and we're going to do one later in the year as well.
Can I come back to Iran finally, just the latest on the negotiations? The Iranian state media suggesting that the U.S. proposals close some of the gaps or is potentially closing gaps.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get ahead of it. I think we've made some progress, but obviously we're dealing with a system that itself is a little fractured, so the Iranian system. And so, but that said, there'll be a couple visits. I understand, I believe the Pakistanis will be traveling to Tehran today, so hopefully that'll advance this further. The president's preference is to do a good deal. That's his preference. It's always been his preference. If we can get a good deal done, that would be great. I'm not here to tell you that it's going to happen for sure, but I'm here to tell you that we're going to do everything we can to see if we can get one. But if we can't get a good deal, the president's been clear. He has other options. I'm not going to elaborate on what those are, but everybody knows what those are. But his preference is always a deal. His preference is always an agreement. His preference is always diplomacy. So let's see if we can get there. There's some good signs, but we understand this. I don't want to be overly optimistic as well. So let's see what happens over the next few days.
And how do you intend to get Raul Castro to the United States?
Well, that was a grand jury in South Florida returned an indictment on Raul Castro. It has nothing to do with us. It's a grand jury. The evidence is clear. He admits to it. Raul Castro openly admits and brags about he shot down gave the order to shoot down civilian airplanes.
And how will you get him here?
Well, I'm not going to talk about how we're going to get him here. If we were trying to get him here, why would I say to the media what our plans are about that? I know you have to ask, but why would I answer that? The bottom line, there's a lot. At that point, he becomes a fugitive of American justice. And, well, you know, if there's an announcement, we'll tell you afterwards, not before. Okay, a couple more and I got to get on. Let's go.
Have conversations with Raul Castro's grandson, or
we remain here's the problem we have. We'll engage with the Cubans. We have. Our ambassadors met with them recently. The CIA director was down there a few weeks ago. There's some State Department communications that occur. I just don't see a lot of, at the end of the day, they got to make a decision. Their system doesn't work, right? Their economic system does not work. It's broken. And you can't fix it with the current political system that's in place. They just don't comprehend how to do it. And it's a failed state. Like, their economy and the model they're trying to follow in Cuba doesn't resemble what anyone is doing anywhere in the world. I mean, there are other ways to do it that can provide the people of Cuba prosperity and opportunity. And it's what I said in the video to them the other day. You look at Cuba, in the Bahamas, in Jamaica, in the Dominican Republic, here in Florida. Cuba's surrounded by places where people have the right to do things like own a business, work for themselves, and be able to vote and for the leaders that govern them and or replace them. So if that's possible all around Cuba, why isn't it possible? Why is that not possible inside of Cuba? And right now, there just doesn't seem to be people over there in charge of the regime who are in any way open to any of those changes. And the things they talk about economically are cosmetic in nature. They're not real, because that's what they've gotten used to all these years, is just buying time and waiting us out. They're not going to be able to wait us out or buy time. We're very serious. We're very focused. As I told you a moment ago, in the context of Iran, the president's preference is always a negotiated agreement that's peaceful. That's always our preference. That remains our preference with Cuba. I'm just being honest with you. You know, the likelihood of that happening, given who we're dealing with right now, is not high. But if they have a change of heart, you know, we're here. And in the meantime, we'll keep doing what we need to do.
It sounds a lot like nation building. And the administration doesn't believe in using force for nation building.
No, it's not nation building. It's not nation building. We are addressing something that's directly related to the national security of the United States. We are involved in places all over the world. You're asking me about Ebola. Important. But Ebola's in Africa. Cuba's 90 miles from our shores. So if you have a systemic meltdown in that country, which is where they're headed, their power plants, by the way, the reason why their power plants break down, they've been having blackouts for years. They had major blackouts last year, and they were still getting free Venezuelan oil. They haven't spent a penny in fixing their energy production, their electrical grid. They don't spend any money on that stuff. They pocket it. They have a private military company named Gaesa who's sitting on $18 billion of assets, and not a penny of that transfers over to the state budget. Not a penny of that goes over to help the people of Cuba, not 1 cent. So even if they had all the diesel in the world, they still wouldn't be able to generate energy because they've stolen the money and haven't invested in their energy infrastructure. So you're heading for a failed state. That's what you have now. But it's 90 miles from our shores. So we'll be impacted by the migratory crisis, by any violence and instability that happens there. It directly implicates the United States' national interest. So the future of Cuba belongs to the people of Cuba in terms of how they're governed, what the system looks like, and so forth. But the national security threat, that's 100% something we're going to focus on, because that's about America. All right, last one, guys.
The likelihood do you see the likelihood of the use of U.S. force to achieve a change in the Cuban political system as growing?
Our preference in Cuba and anywhere in the world is a negotiated diplomatic settlement, okay? And that's what I would say to you. The president always has the option to do whatever it takes to support and protect the national interest and national security of the United States. He has the option to do that if there's a threat to the national security of the United States. And he has shown his willingness to do that when he identifies such a threat. That said, our preference is always a diplomatic solution, always. And you know, a negotiated agreement. That's always our preference. But to answer your question, if there's a threat to the national security of the United States, the president not just has the right, he has the obligation to address that national security threat. All right, let's go. You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
That was Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking in Florida before heading to Sweden for a NATO meeting. And he says that the Pakistanis will be heading to Tehran today and that President Trump is working very hard to get a deal, a peaceful resolution to this conflict. But he does have other options if that doesn't happen. He didn't elaborate. And also Rubio says that Cuba is a failed state and that it's not nation building what they're doing. Again, they're just looking out for the American national security interests, in that if the Cuban economic system collapses, if there are nuclear meltdowns, or if there is some other uprising or other problems, that would directly affect the United States, as it's 90 miles off the U.S. shores and they'd have to deal with migratory crises and so forth. Now, at the next segment, we're going to come to you. We're going to bring new developments in the Minnesota daycare fraud investigation. A woman already tied to the Feeding Our Future scandal faces new charges, and whistleblowers say their warnings were ignored. And a former prosecutor is charged with stealing sensitive records. The case is tied to Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into President Trump.
light rod on my glasses yesterday, and I had to pay up front for a new pair that I can't even pick up for another 10 days. So I looked for another way, and I found Select Specs. I ordered online. My new glasses just arrived this morning, and I can pay over the next few weeks. This is the way to buy glasses.
See now, pay later with Select Specs. Next day delivery and deferred payment options. Only at selectspecs.com.
Is deep sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard MyPillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Hi, welcome back. New developments now in the Minnesota fraud investigations. A Minneapolis daycare owner who was already charged in the massive Feeding Our Future scandal is now accused of stealing millions of dollars. Here are the details.
Authorities are accusing Fahima Mahmood of submitting more than 13,000 fraudulent child care assistant claims worth roughly $4.6 million between 2022 and 2025. The CEO of Future Leaders Early Learning Daycare in Minneapolis was also indicted in February. Prosecutors say she falsely claimed to serve thousands of meals through the federal nutrition program tied to Feeding Our Future. That's the pandemic-era food aid fraud scheme involving $250 million and dozens of people charged.
Here at Future Leaders Early Learning Center, this building received...
Future Leaders Early Learning was featured in a viral video by influencer Nick Shirley. It showed apparently empty childcare centers and helped trigger a federal response. Following the video, federal officials froze roughly $185 million in childcare funding to Minnesota and deployed thousands of immigration agents to the Twin Cities area. Meanwhile, at a Senate hearing yesterday, a whistleblower testifying they faced retaliation after raising concerns about abuse inside Minnesota's state programs.
I naively tried to get these problems solved because I thought I should. I was trespassed from my own workplace, and I was a victim of a smear campaign. I was investigated for being, of course, a incompetent employee, but I was investigated for bugging offices, and I was called racist.
A former state investigator telling lawmakers his unit was pressured after documenting alleged fraud involving childcare centers receiving taxpayer money.
A senior DHS official became angry when they reviewed the document and ordered me to delete a number of paragraphs where I described the scope of the fraud. I soon learned that my refusal to hide this information from the auditor angered a number of high-ranking officials, and within days, the same official told me, quote, "You better be ready for the blank storm that's coming your way."
Jay Swanson testifying that some childcare operators paid parents to keep children at home.
What they would do is they would tell the mothers that we don't want you to bring the kids to our child care center. You take care of your kids at home, but we'll pay you. So a mother of 5 children would, be taking in $1,000 a month to take care of their kids at home. And then in order to fulfill the education or work requirement, the child care center would falsify employment documents so the mothers could take those to their caseworker and show them that they were working at the child care center.
Lawmakers say their testimony could shape future oversight in whistleblower protections.
A former Justice Department prosecutor is facing criminal charges. They relate to Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation of President Trump. Federal prosecutors say Carmen Lineberger secretly emailed sensitive investigative documents to her personal accounts. The indictment allegedly occurred while she served as a senior federal prosecutor in South Florida. Lineberger is accused of disguising the files with names like chocolate cake recipe and bundt cake recipe to conceal the transmissions from government record searches. In a social media post, FBI Director Kash Patel called the investigation politicized and said the Bureau would hold accountable those who abuse the public's trust. Lineberger pleaded not guilty in federal court yesterday. She faces charges including obstruction of justice, concealment of government records, and theft of government property. The Trump administration is awarding $2 billion in grants to 9 quantum computing companies. The government will take equity stakes as part of the deals, as first reported by the Wall Street Journal. The report says the Commerce Department has agreed to provide $1 billion to IBM, and Global Foundries is set to receive $375 million. Other companies, including D-Wave Quantum, Rigetti Computing, and Inflection, are expected to receive about $100 million each. Startup Dirac could receive $38 million. The investments are part of a broader push by the Trump administration to take equity stakes in companies seen as critical to the U.S. supply chain and to counter China's dominance in key industries, including chip making. Quantum computing uses the laws of quantum mechanics to process information far faster than traditional supercomputers on complex problems. Elon Musk announced plans for one of the biggest sales of stock to the public for SpaceX. The move could put him on track to become the world's first trillionaire. Here are the details.
Elon Musk on Wednesday set the launch plans for SpaceX's blockbuster stock market listing. The share sale could make the rocket firm the first company to debut with a value above $1 trillion. That would immediately make it one of the world's most valuable publicly traded firms. But much of that value appears to rest on SpaceX going on to dominate technologies and markets that don't even exist yet. That includes missions to Mars and AI data centers in space. Of its current 3 divisions, only satellite internet unit Starlink is in the black. It made an operating profit of close to $1.2 billion in the first 3 months of the year. But that was not enough to prevent the overall company from posting an operating loss of close to $2 billion. Much of that was driven by its AI unit, which saw losses far exceed its revenue. Now the planned listing cements Musk's control over SpaceX while giving little power to shareholders. It could also put him on track to become the world's first trillionaire, though the board has tied his compensation to audacious targets. That includes building a permanent human colony on Mars. Fans of Musk point to his success in turning Tesla into the world's most valuable car company as among justifications for SpaceX's astronomical valuation. Skeptics point to his long record of making bold predictions which fail to materialize on his timelines. SpaceX is aiming to make its market debut as early as mid-June, with a roadshow for investors due to start around a week earlier.
And staying with SpaceX, the company is preparing to test its next-generation Starship rocket. The fully reusable rocket ship is mission critical to Elon Musk's goal of cutting launch costs, expanding his Starlink satellite operation, and pursuing other long-term endeavors. Starship V3 includes new features designed to support future missions to the Moon and Mars. At over 400 feet tall, the spacecraft consists of an upper stage Starship, where the crew will eventually sit, stacked on top of a super heavy booster rocket. The propulsion system for the upper stage has been adjusted for long-duration missions. New mechanisms will also allow for ship-to-ship docking, refueling in space, and increased maneuverability. 33 upgraded Raptor engines are designed to produce greater thrust. Starship V3 could blast off as soon as today from SpaceX's Starbase facility in Texas. Violent crime continues to drop around the country. New stats show the rate has had its steepest drop since 1937. FBI Director Kash Patel says the Bureau has made major changes, and the changes are working. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Stats show that the U.S. saw violent crime drop at rates not seen in almost 90 years. FBI's first look at 2025 crime data shows that from February 2025 to the end of January 2026, there's been a 9.7% overall drop in violent crime when compared to the previous period. That includes an 18.5% drop in murders and a 7.3% drop in rape, as well as property crime seeing an overall drop of 12.5%, which includes a 16.1% fall in burglaries and a 22.1% drop in vehicle thefts. FBI Director Kash Patel says the 2025 crime data in this report shows the single largest decrease in violent crime and murder since 1937. Over the last 14 months, we made major transformations at the FBI, and these results show those changes are working. In particular, Washington, D.C. is one of the major focuses for the Trump administration. President Trump signed the Making the District of Columbia Safe and Beautiful executive order in March of 2025. The order initiated efforts focused on, quote, preventing crime, punishing criminals, preserving order, protecting American monuments, and promoting beautification and the preservation of our history and heritage.
We're going to beautify the city. We're going to make it beautiful. What a shame. The rate of crime, the rate of muggings, killings, and everything else, we're not going to let it. And that includes bringing in the National Guard, maybe very quickly, too.
Trump initiated having National Guardsmen patrol Washington, D.C., starting in August 2025. Since the executive order was signed, Washington, D.C.'s Metropolitan Police statistics show a 56% drop in homicides and a 21% drop in assaults with a dangerous weapon from the previous period. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser commented on the crime changes last August.
We know that we have had fewer gun crimes, fewer homicides, and we have experienced an extreme reduction in carjackings.
Mayor Bowser has since continued to highlight the downward trend in violent crime in D.C. throughout 2025 and into 2026. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
A bill designed to help inform beachgoers of a shark attack is now headed to President Trump's desk for a signature. The House approved the bipartisan measure known as Lulu's Law yesterday. It would allow state and local authorities to use wireless emergency alerts to send out notifications about unsafe water conditions after a shark attack occurs. Shark attack warnings would be eligible for alerts transmitted through the Federal Communications Commission's emergency notification system, much like severe weather alerts. Lulu's Law was inspired by Lulu Gribben, an Alabama child who was bitten by a shark in June 2024. Lawmakers say another attack involving a different victim happened several miles away about an hour and a half prior to the attack on Lulu. She and her family were at the U.S. Capitol to celebrate the bill's passage. A sweeping House bill backed by President Trump has passed the House. The vote marks a major bipartisan step toward addressing affordability ahead of the midterms. Lawmakers voted 396 to 13 to send the measure to the Senate. The bill aims to boost housing supply and expand homeownership opportunities. A White House official says the administration supports the bill following changes made in the House. President Trump is expected to sign it if it clears the Senate. The package removes a controversial requirement involving the forced sale of investor-owned rental homes. It also keeps limits on large institutional buyers purchasing new single-family houses. Now to New York City, where a sinkhole near a runway at LaGuardia Airport is causing some travel disruptions. Airport officials say they had to shut down the runway yesterday. The Port Authority discovered the sinkhole during a routine airfield inspection. Emergency crews began repairs as the Port Authority warned travelers to expect delays and cancellations. The Federal Aviation Administration slowing incoming flights because of the sinkhole and also approaching thunderstorms. By the afternoon, flight tracking website FlightAware reported about 200 canceled flights and nearly 190 delays at the airport. Gas prices are rising again, just as millions of Americans get ready for Memorial Day travel. AAA says the national average for regular gas hit $4.56 a gallon today. That's the highest level in nearly 4 years and a new wartime high. Gas Buddy expects prices to ease slightly by Memorial Day, but says drivers would still see the second highest Memorial Day holiday gas prices on record. And coming up, Taiwan signals that President Lai Ching-te would welcome a historic first phone call with President Trump after the president suggested he is open to direct talks. And an underwater explorer discusses a dive in the Maldives that turned into a deadly cave tragedy, examining what can go wrong deep beneath the surface.
We come from a long line of farmers, and there's a sense of pride with being part of these multi-generational businesses. But there's also a significant amount of pressure. My senior year of high school, my dad made the decision that this world no longer needed him in it. I don't know if he was overwhelmed by the bills and checks that weren't going to be coming in because of the strawberries dying off, but it breaks my heart that my dad made a permanent decision for a temporary issue. Don't feel like you have to go through it alone.
Farmers have to take care of their physical and their mental health, because what's a farm without a farmer?
In the mornings, that's my time. Watching the sun come up, I can have a cup of coffee and exercise if I want to. It helps me start the day with a sense of gratitude.
Yay!
Every day is a new opportunity. Don't forget to check in on yourself. Love your mind.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My 15-year-old son, Ethan, and I had a fun and relaxing morning. We returned home, and Ethan walked to his best friend's house an hour later. I heard the ambulance scream by the street, carrying my beautiful boy. Ethan was shot in the head in his best friend's house with an unsecured gun. He had 0 chance of survival. The father, the gun owner, he stored his 3 guns and bullets in a shoebox.
How do you feel?
That has to be the most horrific experience that a human could ever have.
David, would you give any advice?
First thing you do is not keep your ammunition with your weapons, and that your weapons need to be locked at all times.
Welcome back. Tensions in the Persian Gulf as U.S. Marines boarded an Iranian oil tanker yesterday. They said it appeared the vessel was attempting to violate the U.S. blockade of Iran's ports. Central Command says American forces released the vessel after searching and directing the ship's crew to alter course. CENTCOM says U.S. forces have redirected 91 vessels since the start of the U.S. blockade against Iran last month. President Trump yesterday saying the U.S. is in the final stages with Iran. He said he would give Iranian officials a limited period of time to come up with a deal or face renewed U.S. strikes. Turning now to Asia, Taiwan says President Lai Ching-te would be happy to speak with President Trump. A phone call between the two leaders would be unprecedented.
Communication channels between Taiwan and the U.S. have always been open. But if given the opportunity, I have the responsibility to voice the sentiments of the Taiwanese society. I would like to emphasize a few points.
President Trump yesterday saying he would speak to Lai. He was asked to clarify whether he was intending to call Lai about the final approval of U.S. arms sales to Taiwan.
Do you have any plans to call President Lai of Taiwan before you make a decision on the weapons package?
Well, I'll speak to him. I speak to everybody. We have that situation very well in hand. We had a great meeting with President Xi. It was amazing, actually. It was amazing. Many of you were there. We'll work on that, the Taiwan problem.
It's the second time in a week the president has indicated he would speak to Lai. On May 15th, President Trump said he had to speak to the person running Taiwan while aboard Air Force One. The presidents of the U.S. and Taiwan have not spoken directly since President Jimmy Carter shifted diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing in 1979. There is no official ban on U.S. and Taiwanese heads of state speaking. It's been a self-imposed diplomatic practice rooted in the U.S. One China policy to maintain only unofficial relations with Taiwan. President Trump's nominees for U.S. ambassadors to Australia and South Korea appearing before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee yesterday, both signaling a tougher approach toward the Chinese Communist Party. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Two longtime China hawks are looking to serve in key ambassador positions right on China's doorstep. Former California Congresswoman Michelle Steele, President Trump's pick for ambassador to South Korea, and former Virginia Congressman David Bratt, nominated for Australia, have long taken confrontational stances against the Chinese Communist Party.
There is no free trade with a totalitarian regime that controls everything. They have no profit motive, right? They control the balance sheet and profit statement of every firm.
Confucius Institute was CCP's propaganda. We had over 200 universities had that, and CCP was actually spreading their propaganda to our students.
At the nomination hearing, Steele told senators the U.S.-South Korea alliance is critical for regional security. She drew on her family's escape from North Korea during the Korean War and highlighted growing trilateral coordination with South Korea and Japan against North Korean weapons programs and Chinese aggression.
We need very strong alliance between United States and Japan and South Korea. It's not just protecting South Korea, but it's protecting all Indo-Pacific region.
Meanwhile, Dave Bratt emphasized the need to push back on Beijing's military buildup and economic coercion.
Amidst China's unprecedented military buildup, the U.S.-Australia alliance is an essential pillar of regional stability and deterrence.
And calling out China's dominance of rare earth minerals.
What is so important about the rare earths, the minerals, and the processing is that they're vital to every aspect of the economy, every aspect of our economy. Not just the F-35s, not just the submarine engines, your lawnmower engine, et cetera, right on down the line, where China's got 90% of the processing around the world.
In October, Trump hosted Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at the White House, announcing progress on rare earths to reduce dependence on China.
Australia is one of our most important partners in countering China's influence in the Indo-Pacific.
It's also important for critical minerals, for countering Chinese coercion in the Indo-Pacific.
Last August, Trump met with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung in Washington, finalizing a trade deal reducing U.S. tariffs on South Korean goods to 15% in exchange for Korean investment of $350 billion in U.S. shipbuilding and energy, among other sectors.
American companies operating in Korea deserve the same market access that Korean companies enjoy in the United States.
The nominations come as the Trump administration's deepening security and economic ties with allies in the Indo-Pacific to counter China's increasing aggression. Now, if confirmed, both Steele and Brad are expected to advance this hardline approach on the ground. For NTD News Washington, I'm Jack Bradley.
Next, divers recovered the last 2 bodies yesterday of 5 Italian divers who died deep inside an underwater cave in the Maldives last week. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with underwater explorer Andy Torbett about the dangers of cave diving and the specialized training it requires.
A mother and daughter were among the 4 divers who died while exploring the Thinadoo-Kondu cave system, known locally as Shark Cave. Their dive instructor also perished. A Maldivian military diver involved in the recovery mission later died from decompression sickness after attempting to reach the group. Underwater explorer Andy Torbett says cave diving can be conducted safely, but only with extensive preparation, specialized equipment, and the proper training.
You know, just because you're a diver doesn't mean you're a cave diver. There's a lot of sort of extra layers of risk management that needs to go in place. And the problem with cave diving is quite a binary environment in the sense that, you know, no one gets injured cave diving. If things go wrong and you can't fix them, then it can often prove fatal.
Rescuers located the bodies deep inside, in the 3rd section of the cave system.
You can safely go to extreme depths, and I have done. I've gone past 400 feet of depth. If you're using the right equipment, like a closed-circuit rebreather, which recycles one breath, akin to the technology they use on spacewalks, which can give you hours and hours and hours underwater. However, if you're using recreational equipment, then it starts becoming dangerous if you go too deep, because often you'll be diving with one single cylinder, which may not give you enough breathing gas, and it allows you no redundancy, no bailout if that system fails.
Torbett says once divers descend below roughly 130 feet, ordinary compressed air can become dangerous. Deep divers instead rely on trimix, a blend of helium, nitrogen, and oxygen, with the gas ratios adjusted depending on the depth. One major hazard is nitrogen narcosis.
There's this rule of thumb called the martini effect. The deeper you go, the more martinis you've had, or your ability to reason and think is, as it is with alcohol, much reduced.
Torbett says cave systems can quickly become disorienting and deadly without proper navigation procedures.
It can be very, very confusing, and you can get lost to the point where you can't find the exit in time and you run out of air. Which is why, again, cave divers will always lay line from the entrance all the way in. You know, this Ariadne's thread, if you're ancient Greek, and we'll use that to get back out. That's our sort of pathway out.
Torbett says paranoia saves lives for cave diving planning.
When you're planning, you should think, right, what's all the things that could possibly go wrong? Let's assume that's going to happen. What am I going to do when it happens? What's my backup plans to make sure, no matter what happens, I'm going to go home at the end of the day?
One of the victims was environmental researcher Monica Montefalcone, who had conducted marine research in the Maldives for years. She died alongside her daughter, Georgia Samakal. Before the expedition, the Maldives Marine Research Center had approved Montefalcone's proposal to study soft corals in the area. Authorities are still investigating what caused the dive to turn from a dream expedition into a deadly tragedy. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And now President Trump is making an announcement at the Oval Office, joined by EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. Let's tune into that.
It's all over the place. Greg Foran, where's Greg? Greg, very good. You look like Central Casting. Just like you're supposed to look. Fairway Store CEO Reynolds Kramer.
Right here, Mr. President.
Okay. Hello, Reynolds.
Hello there.
Maybe I won't look around every time. Why Not Stop CEO and co-owner Ann Guthier. Ann? Yeah. Because it's Ann, I'm going to. Columbiana Foods co-owner Ron Graff Sr.
Right here. Right behind you.
Hello, Ron. Neiman Foods President Richard Neiman.
Right here, sir.
Hi, Richard. Piggy, well, that's a nice, Piggly Wiggly franchise owner. And that's a big company, too. It's actually a cute name. Kevin McDaniel. Where's Kevin? How is that name playing? Good?
Piggly Wiggly's doing great.
Piggly Wiggly. I've heard that, actually. That's great. Franchise owner, Kevin. So you met Kevin. And Food Fresh owner, Michael Gay. Food Fresh? Hi, Michael. How are you, Michael? And this is a representative group of very large-scale retailers. Under the Biden administration, the so-called technology transition rule, which was crazy, forced companies to adopt specific high-cost refrigerants, massively driving up the price of transporting and storing refrigerants and various goods. Many grocery stores and restaurants had no choice but to replace their refrigerators entirely. They went out of business, half of them. And these costs rose. Americans faced higher grocery prices and reduced access to critical medical supplies. It was a very catastrophic thing that they did. At the same time, this rule also drove up the cost of living by forcing consumers to purchase higher cost residential air conditioning units. They went up very substantially in cost, and also they were going to be obsolete very quickly. It created national security risk by adding additional hurdles to the already complicated process of manufacturing semiconductors. So it was a mess. Likewise, the so-called emissions rule imposed crippling leak repair requirements on virtually all existing large-scale refrigeration systems, hurting consumers and small businesses, making it almost impossible for many small businesses to even buy inferior equipment. And this is all across the country. The higher cost threatened thousands of jobs and was passed on in the form of higher prices and higher taxes. Today's reforms will deliver significant financial relief, saving American families and businesses more than $2.4 billion. Think of that, each year. Thanks to today's reforms, the American people have lower grocery prices, cheaper transportation of goods, lower costs of air conditioning, at no detriment at all to our country. Zero, including environmental detriment. My administration's historic deregulatory agendas already saved our country an estimated $1.2 trillion. That's been done over a relatively short period of time. 1.2 trillion with a T. We're committed to fixing the and really completely ending Biden's disastrous regulatory policies and delivering financial relief to each and every American, which is what we're doing. This was a tremendous burden, a tremendous cost. These people had to live with it, not only refrigerants, but a lot more. And it was making the equipment unaffordable. And the actual benefit was nothing. It just made it worse. It made life worse, and it made it worse, and it drove up costs tremendously. So now I'd like to ask Administrator Lee Zeldin, who's absolutely fantastic. He's doing an incredible job. We're proud of you, Lee. Really, the job you're doing is incredible. Followed by Greg, Kevin, and Michael. Is that okay? Lee, go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. As you know, many Americans were expressing a lot of frustration and anger of this rushed, frantic, reckless sprint by the Biden administration to phase out reliable equipment for grocery stores, for restaurants, and for homes. And the consequences, well, they've been devastating. And once again, the Trump administration is answering the call, which will lower the cost of living for hardworking American families. Now look at this chart to your far right. Today's actions are saving over $2.4 billion for American families. It's safeguarding 350,000 jobs. Just at supermarkets alone, we're going to see a savings of $800 million, which Americans will be able to see when they go and buy their food. The Biden EPA face planted when trying to jam through their restrictions. Americans who wanted to be able to fix their equipment were instead being required to buy far more costly new equipment, and that just doesn't make any sense. Refrigeration trucks were being handed impossible restrictions to meet. And once again, here we are in the Oval Office. President Trump is righting another wrong. At the Trump EPA, we are proudly implementing President Trump's agenda every single day and delivering for the American people.
Thank you, Lee, very much. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Lee. Look, on behalf of the Kroger Company, and we operate about 2,700 supermarkets, an orderly transition of equipment reduces both capital costs and operating costs. And at the end of the day, that's good for consumers because we're able to take that and put that into lowering prices, which is the key objective that we have in our business. So thank you very much.
And you were able to save a lot of money and put it elsewhere by not having to do this ridiculous.
Exactly. So it allows us, instead of having to outlay more capital at a faster rate and more operating costs to change that equipment.
Well, to replace a refrigerator that's working perfectly, right?
Yeah, so that allows us, you know, obviously these things have a lifespan, but an orderly transition allows us to move through that in a way which keeps the price of groceries down, and that's something that we're, you know, desperately focusing on, Mr. President.
Great. Thank you very much. Next.
My name's Kevin McDaniel. We operate 14 Piggly Wiggly stores in North Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. On behalf of NGA, the Piggly Wiggly family, which has about 250 stores in the Southeast, we want to thank President Trump for rolling this terrible Biden legislation back, because without it, there would have been a lot of independents out of business. And what people don't realize is it's just not a refrigerant change. It was a equipment change. And those equipment per store, you take a store, our stores run from 25 to 50,000 square feet. You could look for $800,000 to $1.5 million per store to do a change out. That would have done.
The new equipment would not be as good as the old equipment.
No, absolutely not.
It would be inferior equipment because you weren't able to use a refrigerant.
It was thrown together too fast. The technology's not there yet. It's just way too fast. That's the problem. Good idea, but it's terrible. So you would have had all these independents go out of business. You'd had independents out of business, and you would have seen grocery prices soar. That's what would have happened if this would have went through. President Trump, thank you very much. On behalf of every independent in the United States, we cannot thank you enough for what you've done for us. Thank you so much.
I mean, just the bottom line is, so you have great equipment that works incredibly, takes care of your meats and foods and everything else, beautiful refrigeration systems. Take it out and replace it with stuff that barely works, costs a fortune, and it's no good. Think of it. And everyone's going to go bankrupt because the equipment is much more expensive on top of everything else. So the big thing now, we're going to get rid of the law that was signed quite a while ago, and we have to get rid of that because ultimately we want to make it permanent. There's no negative impact by having a good system, but there's a tremendous impact. I think it's going to be bad because a lot of people said the other stuff doesn't cool your product.
No, there's problems with it.
It's so crazy. Please.
Michael Gay, have a single store, Food Fresh in Claxton, Georgia. And exactly, I mean, to echo everyone up here, these refrigeration costs, I'm the only store in a county of 10,000. I literally 2 years ago put in equipment that should have about 20 more years of useful life, and to replace literally every single piece of equipment in our store would have been unbelievably cost prohibitive, driving up costs as we fight every day to try to keep them as low as we can. And you know, if that cost gets too high, especially attached to a regulation, do you have independent stores closed in neighborhoods that once I go away, you've created a food desert? So it's very beneficial that this happened today. It's much more complicated than anyone thinks, and to try to rush this through was just the wrong way to go. So we're very appreciative of you today.
Thank you. I have one grocer who's a friend of mine. He's pretty big, and he said, I'm going to go ahead of the schedule, and he actually replaced a lot of his equipment. He called me up. He said, this crap doesn't work. It doesn't cool the food. So you know about that, right? What a shame. Okay, would anybody, Kevin, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, sir, that this is part of your overall deregulatory agenda, and the big number, 1.2 trillion, is the savings so far, but we're going to be hitting that every year. And we're rolling back stuff that everywhere we look, there's stuff that's as awful as this. And I think that really one of the leaders has been Lee, because the EPA has been a holdup for so many years. But Lee is just out there saving Americans money. And right now, again, if you look at that number, it's $14,000 per family has been saved and reduced costs because of your regulatory
Do we
efforts.
agree that Lee is an MVP candidate? MVP. No, he's done a great job, and he sees what's good, and he's a big environmentalist. I mean, he wants to make sure everything's good, but he also sees stupid things like this. Senator, would you like to speak? Sure.
Well, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you for this because this hits our goal of trying to keep prices low for working families in America, cost of food. I have the Graff family here right behind it. They operate 3 grocery stores in Columbiana County. They had already upgraded their refrigeration systems a few years ago. This was going to cost them millions of more dollars in Columbiana County, which is not an affluent county. It has a grocery store in East Liverpool, Ohio, which is the hometown of the late, great Lou Holtz. And these people, not only would it raise food costs, but it might force them to shut a grocery store down so that the town didn't even have a grocery store. So you're saving money for working families and their grocery prices. You're also saving grocery stores so that we don't have food deserts in rural places across our country.
Yep.
Mr. President, I think it is so important that the people see what you choose to hang right by your desk, which is the Declaration of Independence, which is a reminder that government at its core is supposed to function in a way that allows people the opportunity to pursue happiness and not work against them by coming up with regulations that just make it harder to live, more expensive to live. And from day one, I remember standing with you with the same crew of folks. From day one, you have been digging into all of these regulations that are issued with no thought to how they affect real people and real small businesses and businesses trying to step up and provide jobs and lift up their communities. Thank you for that. Thank you for getting back to the core of what government is supposed to be, and that is working in the interests of the people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good job. Thank you, everybody. So any questions, please?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. How much do you expect that this will save the average American family every week on groceries? And do you expect this change to help Republicans?
Okay, very, very substantial. They're going to be a big saving. We're breaking it down. In fact, numbers are coming out this afternoon sometime, but the average family will save a lot of money, and you can have stores. You know, nobody actually thought of it until it was mentioned this morning. You will have stores closing down in areas where they're not going to have a store anymore. And you really are being forced to spend money, much more money, on much more expensive equipment that really doesn't work. This friend of mine is a very savvy guy, and you know, big league stuff, and he put some in because he wanted to see, and he said the stuff doesn't work. It doesn't cool the food properly. That's why they call the thing that we're talking about a refrigerant. For a research, it's a refrigerant. So that's it. Please, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. President Trump. Are there any assurances from the grocery chains that they'll pass these savings down to consumers?
Well, let's ask Kroger about that. Come on. That's a very good question. You have the biggest right here.
Yeah. We're actually right in the middle of doing that at the moment. So we're concerned about the cost of living. It makes a big difference when you get your pricing right, and we certainly are interested in ensuring that all our customers right across the country are paying the right price.
You know, if it were the right thing to do, if it would be, you know, bad for the environment what they had, I'm all for it. I'm all for that stuff. But when you're forced to put in very inferior equipment that's not going to work, you're going to be wasting a lot of food product because it doesn't cool the food properly. And it's actually a bad thing, and the bad thing is more expensive than what they already have, and in many cases they just put it in. You know, they just put in the other apparatus, and a lot of people have said they've spent money recently to do it, and then this rule came up out of nowhere, and the stuff they just put in they have to change. I'd be all for changing if it was good, even if it was a little bit good. But this is actually bad.
Yeah, do you not have any environmental concerns, though, with this?
No, there is no environmental concern. And Lee covered that really well. There's no environmental concern. It's not going to have any impact on the environment.
Mr. President, with many Americans concerned about affordability ahead of the midterms, there is some backlash among Senate Republicans to some of the other priorities, the ballroom and the anti-weaponization fund. You clearly still have a strong hold in the Republican Party. Your candidates did very well this week during the primaries. But are you losing control?
My candidates did well. Not all candidates did well.
But are you losing control of the Senate, sir? Are you losing control of the Senate Republicans?
I don't know. I really don't know. I can tell you, I only do what's right. I don't need money for the ballroom. You know, I'm making a gift of the ballroom. This is the biggest misreporting that I've ever seen. The ballroom is being built. It'll cost. It was going to be $200 million. I've doubled the size of it because we need it, and it's being done in conjunction with the military and with the very much in conjunction with the military and Secret Service. We're on time, on budget. It's going beautifully. Have all the money I need. We're making a gift to the United States. They came along and they said, we want to make it the White House overall more secure. And I understand that. Not for me, because I'll be gone. You know, I'll be gone and you'll have somebody else in for hopefully hundreds of years. But that's what they're doing it for. The ballroom is paid for. It's a gift. I mean, I want to make it clear because so many people say, I thought you were giving this away. And all of a sudden, the money that they're spending is for security, having to do maybe around the ballroom and other parts of the house. But this is not for the ballroom. The ballroom is being a tremendous amount of what's being done with respect to the ballroom is for national security, including, as an example, a drone port on top of which was top secret until litigation made it less than top secret. But we have a drone port. We have the glass that's 4 inches thick, bulletproof glass. We have bulletproof walls. We have things. You need a place like this. But this is being made as a gift from me and other people that are great patriots that spend a lot of money. We're building what will be the finest ballroom anywhere in the world. If they want to spend money on securing the White House, I think it would be very, very much a good expenditure. But the ballroom is being built.
But what if Congress doesn't sign off on the security money, sir?
Then the White House won't be a very secure place.
But then regarding Cuba, there was an aircraft carrier that just arrived there this week, an aircraft carrier. Are you sending that there to intimidate the Cuban government?
No, not at all. The Cuba, look, it's a failed country. Everybody knows it. They don't have electricity. They don't have money. They don't have really anything. They don't have food. And we're going to help them along, and we're going to help them because number one, I want to help them. I don't want to on a humanitarian basis, but we have the Cuban American population, much of it living in Miami and Florida. That's a great group of people, amazing group of people, industrious, they're great Americans. They've wanted this to happen. They want to go back to their country. They want to help their country. I hope they're going to stay here, but they want to go back. They want to invest in their country and, see if they can bring it back. Other presidents have looked at this for 50, 60 years doing something, and it looks like I'll be the one that does it, so we'd be happy to do it. We want to open it up to Cuban Americans where they can go back and help.
The GNC released a report this morning, their report on the last election on why you won and Democrats lost. One thing that it mentions is how they failed to reach Middle America, Southern Americans. Do you think they've learned lessons from that election, and have you seen that report?
I think the elections are so rigged, and we have to do something about it, and we're going to do something about it, but we cannot continue to have, and frankly, the Senate and the House, they ought to get together and they ought to pass the Save America Act so that you have voter ID, and it's so important you have proof of citizenship, little thing like proof of citizenship, and also mail-in voting, which is so crooked. So in Maryland, as you probably saw, they had 500,000 mail-in votes that were corrupt. They were corrupt. They said the printer made a mistake. Don't believe that. And they got caught with 500,000 mail-in ballots that were corrupt. We've got to stop it. We have a country that has a very corrupt. We have more corrupt elections than third world countries have. And we ought to get smart. Pass the Save America Act. That'll be a long way. You have voter ID, voter identification. The Democrats don't want to pass. Now, I'll tell you what, the Democrat voters do want to pass, 87%. But the Democrat politicians don't want to pass. And the reason is they'd never be elected again. Because with their policy of open borders, transgender for everyone, I call it transgender mutilization of your children for everybody, men playing in women's sports, all of the stuff that they do, high taxes. They want a tax hike. They voted in favor of high taxes. They voted against a tax cut. They voted in favor of men playing in women's sports. I don't know what these people are thinking. The only way they can win is to cheat, and that's what they want to do. and we ought to pass the Save America Act. Yeah, please.
Yes, Mr. President. I have two questions for you. One of them, which first about the ballroom and the second about Iran. First, I'm curious, what is the stone that you're going to be using? And I ask that for a reason, because I live in Stafford County, and you know a lot about history and stuff like that. So you know the stone that was quarried for the Capitol and the White House is from Stafford County. They still have quarries, so down there.
We're using marbles and granites, mostly marbles and granites.
All right, excellent. And then my second question is, the Vice President mentioned the other day there would be accommodations, they were willing to make accommodations with the Iranian deal. Could you kind of expand on those possible accommodations? Does that include...
When you say combination of what?
Accommodations, he's talking about accommodations as far as making a deal going. Would that
I don't know, I can't tell you. Right now we're negotiating, and we'll see. But either we're going to get it one way or the other. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon. You know, when people hear it, because oftentimes they won't put up the second part of the sentence having to do with, I'll say, this is more important than anything that we have to talk about. And usually they'll cut it off, the fake news. I said, because this is the nuclearization of a country that some people would say is somewhat crazy, and we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all it is. We can't let it. You will have a nuclear war in the Middle East, and that war will come here. That war will go to Europe. We cannot let that happen, and it won't happen. It's not going to happen. That's more important than anything else. We can't. I can think of nothing that's more important than the fact that we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon, and we won't. Yeah, Jeff?
Following up on that, sir, Iran is negotiating with Oman to set up a formalization of charging tolls in the Strait of Hormuz. Is that acceptable to you?
Well, we're looking at it. We hear about it. They've negotiated. They've had a relationship with them before, and we'll see. We have total control of the Strait of Hormuz, as you know, with our blockade. The blockade's been 100% effective. Nobody's been able to get through. It's like a steel wall. It's our Navy. We have the greatest military anywhere in the world. We wiped out their Navy. We wiped out their air. I think they're down to about, I would say we knocked out 85% of their missile capacity. It's very hard for them now to build missiles, to build drones. We have great drone technology, anti-drone technology now that frankly, we didn't have even 2 months ago. We have unbelievable drone technology, both for making them and also for knocking them down. But look, we're going to either make sure they don't have a nuclear weapon, or we're going to have to do something very drastic. And the people of the country, I believe when it's put to the people of our country, they will all agree that we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. Yes, Daniel?
Just one follow-up on that. How do you want things to end up with the Strait of Hormuz, though? Would you like them to have...
Well, we want it open. We want it free. We don't want tolls. It's international. It's an international waterway. They're not charging tolls. Right now, they are losing $500 million a day is what it's projected. I don't know, it sounds like a lot of money, but whether it's 500 or 200 or 300, they're losing a lot of money. There hasn't been a ship that's been able to get through without our approval. And the Navy has done an amazing job. And no ship is going to Iran, as you know. No ship is going to, or out of Iran without our approval.
Can they keep their highly enriched uranium?
No, we get the highly enriched. We will get it. We don't need it. We don't want it. We'll probably destroy it after we get it, but we're not going to let them have it. Okay?
Mr. President, I have two questions. First on deregulation, the second on the Supreme Court. You, coming from business, you've seen the effects of what unnecessary red tape can do to business. Do you believe that given the amount of deregulatory actions you're taking along with this, the pulling back the endangerment finding, the CAFE standards, the tax cuts and tariffs, do you believe that you've made the United States the most pro-business, pro-investment country in the world?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, because we are. For every one new regulation that we add, we're getting rid of 20 to 30 to 40, and now it's actually at even a number. In my first term, for every regulation that was added, we got rid of a minimum of 10. And I understand, Lee, that it's up to 43 or 44 right now. So if we add a regulation, we get rid of 43, 44. We're making it a much more pro-business, pro-people. You know, regulations are very costly for the people. They're bad for everybody. They're bad for jobs, bad for everybody. And we have, as of today, we have more people working in the United States than at any time in the history of our country. To me, it's one of my favorite stats. but we have more people today working in the United States than at any time in the history. And this is with the Iran conflict. That'll end soon, very soon. And when it ends, your gasoline prices will go down lower than they were before. You know, I left Iowa a few months ago, and gasoline was at $1.85 a gallon. And we'll be hitting numbers like that again.
Mr. President, on the Supreme Court.
But we'll be hitting them in a much nicer way, by the way. We will be hitting them, and we will have a country that will not have a nuclear weapon. Yeah, Daniel?
So one is today.
Yeah, let me just finish with him.
On the Supreme Court, sir, we're still waiting for the decision on birthright citizens.
Yeah, birthright.
You attended the oral arguments of that. Can you just explain what's at stake with that decision, sir?
It's a big decision that we're waiting for from the Supreme Court. We had a terrible tariff decision. They cost our country a fortune. They said do it a different way. We're doing it a different way, but we're going to most likely have to pay back $149 billion. All they had to do is put a little sentence in there, half a sentence, saying that any monies paid don't have to be paid back. You know, you're talking about the people in many cases that hate our country. Give them back money. It was a terrible decision. And it's not going to affect because we do the tariffs a different way. The tariffs are what's bringing in all of this money. It's really made our country rich, modernly rich. Now we have another one coming up, which is birthright citizenship. And we're the only country in the world that has it. You step into our country and you're all of a sudden a citizen. You come in a certain way. This was not meant for Chinese billionaires to have their children become citizens of our country. This was meant, or other rich people, poor people. This was meant for the babies of slaves. This was signed right after the Civil War. You look at the dates alone, immediately after. This was having to do with the babies of slaves. And people have used it. And if this is allowed to stand, it will be a disaster economically for our country. And you'll have 25% of the people coming into our country coming in through birthright citizenship, and we won't have any control. This decision by the Supreme Court is a very big one. They'll probably rule against me because they seem to like doing that. Frankly, I'm not happy with some of the decisions. Look at NIL. Look what they've done. Look what the courts have done to college sports. They're destroying college sports. They're destroying universities. But birthright citizens are a big deal. And literally, if that's allowed to stand, and again, this was a civil war. This was right after the Civil War, and it has to do with the babies of slaves. It doesn't have to do with the babies of very rich people coming into the country. One of them came in with 57 children, 57 children. They're using the system, and it's usually people that hate our country, if you want to know the truth. Birthright citizen is done by no other country in the world the way we're doing it. We're a laughing stock. And if the Supreme Court approves that decision, they have done a great disservice to the United States of America, just like they did a great disservice by costing us $149 billion on tariffs by saying do it a different way. Get the same result, do it a different way. We should have won that decision. We had a very strong, very powerful dissent. We had 3 dissents. So it wasn't like a unanimous decision by any means. We had very powerful dissents. When you read that dissent, people that read that dissent say you really should have won this case. We should have won that case on tariffs. That case cost our country $149 million. It goes to people that hate our country. So now we have another one coming up, birthright citizenship. It would be a disgrace. It would be a disgrace if the Supreme Court of the United States allows that to happen. Remember what I said, 20 to 25% of the people coming into our country will come in through birthright citizenship. They'll become citizens through birthright citizenship, and it'll cost us numbers that are, I don't even think they're doable. And it's all up to a couple of people. And I hope they do what's right. Birthright citizenship is a disgrace. The fact that, look at the people that are bringing the suit. Study the people that are bringing the suit. These are not people that love our country, I can tell you that.
Mr. President, why is today's executive order on AI been postponed?
Because I didn't like certain aspects of it. I postponed it. I think it gets in the way of, we're leading China, we're leading everybody, and I don't want to do anything that's going to get in the way of that lead. We have a very substantial on AI. It's causing tremendous good, and it's also bringing in a lot of jobs, tremendous numbers of jobs. Again, we have more people working right now than we've ever had. I really thought that could have been a blocker, and I want to make sure that it's not.
Mr. President, your heart. Mr. President.
Wait 1 second.
With President Xi last week, did you discuss AI safeguards?
Who? What?
In China last week with President Xi,
Yes.
did you discuss AI
I did.
safeguards?
No, I discussed it. And he acknowledges how well we're doing. We're doing well. He's doing. It's the two of us. The two countries are fighting for it. Other countries are way behind. Way behind. They're fighting for it. They want it. Everybody wants it, but they're way behind. But I didn't want to do it. I postponed that meeting. It was a press conference. It was a signing, actually, because I didn't like what I was seeing.
Mr. President, a few moments ago, the Commission of Fine Arts approved your design, the design for your arch. Do you think you need congressional?
Oh, that's good news. I finally get good news from you.
Do you think you need
What was the vote? Do you
congressional
know what the
approval
vote
for it,
was? What was the vote?
I'm just seeing the headline here. I don't have the exact vote. But
So we're building what's called the Triumphal Arch right opposite the Arlington Memorial Bridge, right by Arlington Cemetery. It's beautiful. It's the Arc de Triomphe would be the one that you would probably know in Paris. It's one of the most beautiful. It's a very similar size, slightly larger. We have to do slightly larger. It doesn't have to be a lot larger. Otherwise, you'd all be disappointed in me. But it's even far more beautiful. And I think that the Arc de Triomphe is beautiful. It's a couple of 100 years old, but I think it's beautiful. And some arcs go back over 1,000 years. And it's called a triumphal arc. It's usually done for victories in war and things. There are 59 of them in the world. And some are really beautiful. And we're the only major, Washington, D.C., which should be number one. We're the only important and major city that doesn't have one. We don't have a triumphal arch. So it was meant to be built for many years. The circle going up to the bridge, people pass that circle. They say, why isn't something built here? And so that's very good. We just got approval from Fine Arts. That's fantastic.
Right, but you need Congress to sign off on it.
No, we don't. No, we're doing it. It's the land is owned by the Interior Department. We don't need anything from Congress.
Are you attending your son's wedding this weekend? Are you attending your son's wedding this weekend, by the way?
He'd like me to go, but it's going to be just a small little private affair, and I'm going to try and make it. I'm in the midst. I said, this is not good timing for me. I have a thing called Iran and other things. That's one I can't win on. If I do attend, I get killed. If I don't attend, I get killed. By the fake news, of course, I'm talking about. No, but he's got a very person who I've known for a long time, and hopefully they're going to have a great marriage.
Mr. President, actually to add to the art, I just actually passed by it on my way here.
Right.
I saw the pink flags, and
Right.
there's just geese that are there all the time.
Right.
So it's perfect. How long will that take? And also, I have to say, I have to pass along something for my mother, because she drove in with me. She was amazed by all the people she was seeing on the streets here in D.C. She doesn't get in here as much.
D.C. is hot again.
She was noticing how clean and beautiful
It's
it was,
clean.
so I'm passing it along.
That's right. Well, that's the way I do it. Clean. You take a look outside. We had broken path. It was so terrible coming into the White House. It was slate. Slate's a roofing material. It's not a walking material. But the slate was all broken and chipped and terrible. And I put down a new granite floor and paid for it myself, by the way. But I put down a nice new granite floor. It looks beautiful. It's actually getting rave reviews. It's beautiful. It's a terrible having people walking up to the White House and they're walking over broken tiles and broken floors. So now we just finished. It's going to be finished when the moldings are put on. But you might take a look at it. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's beautiful. Of other things we're doing while you're at it, we've fixed, we have 31 fountains in Washington. Of the 31, not one worked. Now we have 21 working, and the others are going to be fixed. And people are calling and saying, it's amazing what's happened, the fountains. And they're working top level. And my most exciting is the reflecting pool between the Washington Monument and the Washington Monument, Lincoln Memorial. It's It's 2,500 feet long by almost 200 feet wide. It's a massive structure, if you think of it. It's taller than the tallest building in the world. If you sat the building down, the tallest building in the world would not reach the end of it. It's a very big thing. It hasn't worked properly since it was built in 1922. President Obama and Biden spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to fix it. They didn't. Of course, they couldn't do that. They didn't fix it. It was a mess. So mostly they turned it off, collecting garbage. It looked horrible. And we are very close to getting it finished. And when it's finished, it'll be beautiful. It'll be blue water, dark blue. We call it American flag blue because that's the name of the color that we chose. American flag blue. Can't do better than that. It's a rich, dark blue. And it'll be, I think, very reflective, very, very good. Big project. I decided to do a much bigger job. I was going to just get it open, but I said, let's do it right. Let's get it open and let's have it be good because President Obama, President Biden spent hundreds of millions of dollars, much more than 100 million, but hundreds of millions. It never worked. In fact, when they finished it, it was much worse than it was before. It leaked at a higher level. They would have to fill it up every single day with water. The whole thing was ridiculous, so they ended up turning it off, and it became like a garbage dump. Well, it's pretty close to finished. So they had estimates of $350 million to fix it. I'll be doing it for a tiny fraction of that. A bigger job than I originally thought I'd do it for $2 or $3 million, just do a base. But now we're fixing up the exterior of it. So we'll probably be in there for less than $20 million. And the estimate was going to be using a different method, 350. It was going to take 4 years, 350 million. I'll be doing it in basically a couple of months for less than $20 million. That includes all of the exterior base, which I never included in my original numbers. When I went there last week, I saw the exterior was in very bad shape, as well as the interior, so I said, we're going to fix that too. The stone. It's going to be beautiful. When that's done, you might see it. It's probably 3/4 done. We have rain delays. We get a lot of delays, but that will be something special. The reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln and Washington monuments, I think it's going to be incredible. It's largely done. If you want to go see it, you can see it before we put the water in. The key is to have it done before July 4th. We want to see if we can have it done before July 4th. But we have about 20 or 21 of the water features in Washington open. And I can say, we top of the line, they look better than they did the day they were built. Some of them have been closed for 25, 30 years. There's been no water for 25 or 30 years. And they're really beautiful. Some of the fountains are as beautiful as I've ever seen. And you probably see them. And in addition to that, you brought up something. Washington, D.C. is now a safe city. We had a city that was one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the country. And now it's considered a very safe city. Restaurants are opening. Restaurants were closing. You couldn't go to a restaurant. The restaurants were closing all over because of the danger from during the Biden administration. Now you have restaurants opening, it's thriving, and it was very nice that you said that. I like this reporter. No, it's nice. We have a vibrant city again. People are going out. I have a lot of people in the White House. Every time I see somebody, they thank me, and I know immediately what. They thank me for making the city safe. They walk to work now. Before that, they'd take Uber or something, and they felt unsafe even in Uber. You know, we moved over 5,000 people out of the city, career criminals that came in through the open borders and other reasons. And we moved over 5,000. And an interesting statistic is that 2% of the population creates 91% of the crime. And the reason I like that is that you can handle 2% of the population. Mr. Kroger, I see, do you have stores in Washington? You see a big difference?
We do.
Boy, you said the right thing. That would have been the end of Kroger. All right, okay, we'll do one or two more. Please, back. Yeah, please.
Do you think Democrats are genuine in their focus on affordability, especially after they delivered 40-year high inflation last time they were in power? And then, or do you think they're using it or focusing on it as a means to try and win midterms and begin the impeachment process?
The second. Look, the Democrats had the highest inflation in the history of our country. 48 years, they say, but the history of our country. They had the highest inflation that we've ever had. When I inherited it, I inherited very high prices. And from day one, they said, affordability. Affordability is a word, because they're good at that. They're good at words, but I'm good at words too. But they hit me with affordability. I'd just gotten there. They hit me with eggs. We had a news conference on my third day, and they said, egg prices are through the roof. I said, I just got here. Tell me about eggs. And we got the prices down, way down, actually lower than it was 4 years before. But we've gotten everything. The thing that we have now, the only thing that's really of great concern, two things. Beef is coming down, and the reason is they put restrictions on beef under the Biden administration, and it takes a while to settle that, but prices are down. But the big thing is, of course, energy. We had the energy way down, but I had to do a journey to Iran. I had to say, you know, we just hit the best markets. By the way, the stock market today is at the highest it's ever been, and we've had 59 of them, 59 days out of a very short period of time where the stock market hit all-time highs. So we have an all-time high stock market. We have all-time high job numbers. We have 401ks just hit the highest number they've ever been. So many of you have 401ks. That means you're richer than you've ever been. And we're doing really well. But they came up with this word, affordability. But it's them that caused the problem. And they used that word, Senator, they used that word right from the beginning. I was in one day, and I heard somebody on television say, affordability. And I inherited this mess from them. But we've got it in great shape. The country's doing well. We're respected all over the world. This country is respected. We're the hottest country. We were a dead country 2 years ago. And now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. So I think most of you appreciate that. Some of you don't. Yeah, please.
Harriet Pickett, Washington Times. If the Supreme Court doesn't rule in your favor on birthright citizenship, are there any other avenues that your administration has explored to remedy this? And did you talk with President Xi about Chinese foreign nationals taking advantage of birth tourism here in this country and how he could have...
Well, it's a great question. No, if the Supreme Court hurts our country by ruling against us on birthright citizenship, that would be just between that and tariffs, what damage they've done, what damage they've done. Again, they could have said, which they said, do the tariffs a different way. But they could have said the money taken in, hundreds of billions of dollars, $149 billion we have to pay back. Kevin understands that better than anybody. All they had to do is say, any money taken in, because they agree you could do it a different way. Any money, this is a better way. But the other way is a very secure way. And maybe in many ways it's a stronger way. They could have said, any money taken in thus far does not have to be paid back. To, in many cases, the enemy, people that don't like our country. Or it was a half a sentence. The Supreme Court could have saved us $149 billion with a half a sentence. But they chose not to do that. Now they have a ruling which is a much bigger ruling, actually, birthright citizenship. The cost, forgetting about the fact that it's wrong, the cost of birthright citizenship is barely not affordable by our country. It's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars. And it's in their hands. What can I tell you? It's a common sense ruling. It's common sense. It was exact timing. And it's about the babies of slaves. Thank you for that question.
Mr. President.
Go ahead, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. So do you think if Democrats were to take control of Congress again, they would immediately begin the impeachment process?
I think if Democrats took control of the Congress, I think that, and let's say took control of the country, I think that this country's finished. These people are sick. They suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, but really they have bad policy. They have horrible policy. They cheat on elections. They get elected by cheating on elections. But you would have 2 states added. They'll terminate the filibuster immediately. Republicans should do that. They'll terminate the filibuster. You'll have Washington, D.C., and you'll have Puerto Rico as a state, which will be a disaster, which would be 4 Senate seats, tremendous numbers of electoral college votes. You will have that's really bad, but you will have the destruction of our country. They want to go to 21 Supreme Court judges. That's their perfect number. They talk about 13, but they want to go to 21 Supreme Court judges. If they get in power, I think this country would be maybe finished. If I didn't win the election, I'll say this, we've become the hottest country anywhere in the world. We were a dead country 2 years ago. If I didn't win this election, we would have been a country that was essentially, I don't even know that we would have been a country any longer. They were destroying our country. They were letting hundreds of thousands, millions of people pour through our southern border, criminals, people from jails, people from mental institutions, drug dealers and drug addicts. They were sending everybody, countries were sending everybody that they didn't want by the millions, 25 million people. If I didn't win this election, I believe our country would have been finished. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Keep moving. Thank you, guys. Keep going. Thank you, guys.
That was President Trump speaking in the White House alongside EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin about reducing the regulations on refrigerants to bring down grocery prices for Americans. President Trump says these Biden-era regulations were causing these grocers, Kroger, Piggly Wiggly, to give some examples, to have to buy equipment that doesn't work and is more expensive, that it doesn't actually cool the food, but now they're able to buy their similar products that they use now that get the job done, but that do not cause environmental harm, President Trump says. And as a side note, he says that that triumphal arc has been approved and it is in the works. Now, if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. And for round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/TV or download our NTD app. I'm Kevin Hogan. Stay tuned.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
Yeah, so there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump says the U.S. is in the final stages of negotiating with Iran. Why he says he's willing to wait, and the latest on the U.S. naval blockade as U.S. Marines board an Iranian tanker. President Trump describing murder charges against former Cuban regime leader Raul Castro as a big moment for the Cuban people, saying U.S. actions involving Cuba are one of the biggest things his administration has done. Republicans holding a roundtable today to expose fraud in government programs with a focus on an alleged $1 billion home care Medicaid fraud scheme.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Thursday, May 21st. I'm Kevin Hogan. President Trump is reacting to murder charges filed against former Cuban regime leader Raul Castro. The president calling U.S. action toward the communist nation one of the most important steps his administration has taken. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more.
President Trump saying the indictment of Raul Castro was a long time coming.
I think it was a very big moment for people that, not only Cuban Americans, but people that came from Cuba, that want to go back to Cuba, people that want to see their family in Cuba.
The president calling Cuba a failing nation.
We're there to help. We're there to help the families, the people. And again, a lot of those people are related to me in the sense that I've had such a great relationship with Cuban Americans.
President Trump saying the U.S. has a lot of people in Cuba.
We had CIA there. We have Marco is there. Marco's parents, as you know, were from Cuba. So we have a lot of expertise in Cuba. And it's not going to be like the biggest thing we've ever done, but I will tell you, to a lot of people, it's going to be one of the most important. They've been looking for this moment for 65 years. So we'll see what happens.
The president downplaying any military action.
There won't be escalation. I don't think there needs to be. Look, the place is falling apart. It's a mess. And they've sort of lost control. They've really lost control of Cuba.
Federal prosecutors yesterday announcing charges against former Cuban President Raul Castro in the 1996 downing of civilian planes operated by Miami-based exiles.
For nearly 30 years, the families of 4 murdered Americans have waited for justice.
The indictment was related to Castro's alleged role in the shoot-down of 2 small planes operated by the exile group Brothers to the Rescue.
They were unarmed civilians and were flying humanitarian missions for the rescue and protection of people fleeing oppression across the Florida Straits.
Castro, now 94, was Cuba's defense minister at the time. The charges include murder and destruction of an airplane.
My message today is clear. The United States and President Trump does not and will not forget its citizens.
Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche saying the indictment isn't just for show.
So we expect that he will show up here by his own will or by another way.
After communist dictator Fidel Castro seized control of the island in 1959, Cubans began to flee in droves to the United States. The journey through the Florida Straits was a tough one, and refugees perished because ships became lost or capsized. The Miami-based organization Brothers to the Rescue was formed in 1991 to assist asylum seekers on their journey by guiding boats through the strait or rescuing those stranded at sea. The plane's unarmed Cessnas also conducted pro-democracy work such as dropping leaflets during protests. Cuba's government yesterday denied the allegations against Castro, calling them politically motivated and legally invalid. Secretary of State Marco Rubio appealing to the Cuban people to reject the country's communist leadership, saying President Trump is offering a path to a new Cuba.
Una nueva Cuba, donde ustedes.
A new Cuba where you, and not just the Communist Party of Cuba, can own a television station or a newspaper. A new Cuba where you can complain about a failing system without fear of going to jail or being forced to leave your island.
Cubans in Miami celebrating charges against Castro, saying it's never too late for justice.
Today it has happened. We have an indictment of the man primarily responsible for the shoot-down of the Brothers to the Rescue aircraft.
The Justice Department alleges the final orders to use deadly force against the Brothers to the Rescue flights came from Raul and Fidel Castro. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And right now, the U.S. Department of Justice and other federal officials are announcing a major law enforcement action involving fraud in Minnesota. Let's tune in.
Services program designed to help the homeless find and maintain housing. It was estimated in 2020 that it would cost only about $2.5 million a year to fund this program, but it ended up costing almost 50 times that much, over $104 million by 2024 due to fraud. And because of all the fraud, Minnesota had to shut the program down in 2025, and now these services no longer exist for these vulnerable homeless populations. The same trends exist for other Minnesota-run taxpayer-funded programs. An autism program that cost the taxpayer $600,000 just 6 years ago skyrocketed to over $400 million. And to be sure, that number is not driven by supply and demand. It is not driven by health care or charity. It is fraud. To tackle this crisis, and it is a crisis in Minnesota, earlier this year, the Department of Justice surged 11 strike force prosecutors from across the country to be here on the ground fighting the rampant fraud targeting our taxpayer-funded programs. And large numbers of agents from our partners at the FBI, HHS-OIG, HSI, IRS-CI, and others joined our prosecutors to rapidly unmask fraudulent actors in Minnesota. These agents and prosecutors have been working around the clock to root out the criminals stealing taxpayer dollars, and I am proud of all they accomplished in such a short time. Their hard work made today possible. Make no mistake, today's charges are unprecedented. They include the highest loss amount ever charged in a Medicaid case in Minnesota and the largest autism fraud scheme ever charged by the Department of Justice. The common theme throughout these cases is fraudsters exploiting vulnerable programs and vulnerable people to enrich themselves, no matter the consequences to the programs or to the people. For example, one defendant is charged with defrauding the Integrated Community Supports Medicaid program. This program is designed to help individuals with disabilities live independently. One patient was supposed to be receiving 24-hour care through this program, but he was actually being serviced by a fraudster and received no services. This patient was later found dead. Meanwhile, the architect of this fraud scheme was billing Medicaid as if he was providing care to this patient. The defendant even submitted a claim of over $400 for services he never provided the day before this man died. In another example, 2 defendants have been charged for defrauding a program designed to offer medical services to those with autism spectrum disorder. As alleged, the defendants paid kickbacks to parents who brought their children to autism centers, diagnosed children with autism regardless of medical necessity, and billed for autism services that were never actually provided. In one final example, 2 defendants have been charged in an over $22 million fraud scheme involving the Individualized Home Supports Program. This program was meant to support disabled individuals who wanted to live in their own homes. Instead, these disabled individuals were used like lottery tickets by these defendants to generate millions of dollars, which these defendants used to expand their real estate holdings, purchase luxury vehicles, and splurge on expensive jewelry. We will not, full stop, tolerate this greed and deceit. We will not let fraudsters bankrupt Medicare and Medicaid the same way that they bankrupted the Housing Stabilization Services Program. As mentioned, this is just the beginning. With the support of President Trump, Vice President Vance, Acting Attorney General Blanche, Chairman Ferguson and the White House Anti-Fraud Task Force, Secretary Kennedy, Dr. Oz and his team, and the entire federal fraud-fighting apparatus, the Department of Justice will continue expanding our reach across the country to pursue all fraud, no matter how large, no matter how small, no matter how hard. Since April 1st, DOJ's Fraud Division has announced over 450 fraud enforcement actions nationwide, representing billions of taxpayer dollars. And this week already, we're delivering results coast to coast with a trial conviction in Brooklyn involving a $40 million drug distribution and fraud scheme, and a trial conviction in Los Angeles involving a $40 million Botox injection fraud scheme. To expand our reach, we are announcing today the expansion of the healthcare fraud Midwest Strike Force to Minnesota and the hiring of 15 additional prosecutors dedicated to combating Medicaid fraud nationwide. These additional resources will ensure that the DOJ's fraud division will be better equipped to stop fraud and hold criminals accountable. My message to the Minnesota community and to all of America is this. If you see something that seems too good to be true, tell us. In some areas, such as in the daycare prosecutions we announced today, a culture of fraud has taken root, where child care centers even offer kickbacks to parents to enroll their children. If something sounds good to be true, it is. Do the right thing, speak out, help us win the fight against fraud. And now my message to the fraudsters is this: eat, drink, and be merry today, because your days of frolicking and freedom are numbered. We are doing everything we can to find you. And when we do, we will prosecute you, and we will claw back every dollar you have stolen from the American people. We will not rest until every fraudster knows that the cost of stealing from the American people is far higher than any scheme is worth. Thank you all for being here. I'll now turn the podium over to Secretary Kennedy.
Thank you, Colin. Hey, everybody. I want to start. I thought I was going to have a slide here. I want to call your attention to this, which is in your... Okay, here it is. Which is in your packet. This was the cost of the Early Intervention and Development Program in 2020. It was $38.1 million. This is what we expected to be paying every year. Instead, this year it hit $442 million. And that is, I'm showing you that because that's the magnitude of the fraud and the damage that we're talking about today. And I want to thank Todd Blanche, who couldn't be here today, Colin McDonald, and everyone at the Department of Justice for leading this effort. I want to thank also the FBI, who you're going to hear from in a little while, the HHS Office of Inspector General, CMS, and especially Dr. Oz, the White House Anti-Fraud Task Force, and Vice President Vance, and the investigators and law enforcement personnel whose relentless work made today's action possible. Today's arrests represent the largest autism fraud bust in American history. This was not a paperwork error. It was not a technical violation. This was organized threat, organized theft that exploited the most vulnerable children in America. Deceived families, stole taxpayer dollars meant to help children with autism access legitimate care and support. Investigators uncovered brazen schemes that billed taxpayers for non-existent services, fraudulent diagnoses, and fake care, while criminals enrich themselves at public expense. Every fraudulent autism diagnosis steals time, care, and resources from the children for whom this program was denied and who desperately need this care. Families with autistic children already face enormous challenges navigating therapies, specialists, and support systems. Fraud makes those barriers even steeper. America is facing a real autism crisis. Today, approximately 1 in every 31 children is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Medicaid finances a significant share of autism-related services nationwide, and spending has risen dramatically over the last decade, and a lot of that spending is because of fraud. When criminals exploit these programs, taxpayers lose billions, and vulnerable children lose their access to care. Healthcare fraud now costs the United States tens of billions of dollars every year. Some estimates place the broader cost of healthcare fraud and improper payments at $100 billion annually. That fraud drives up healthcare costs for all Americans. It weakens public trust. It drains taxpayer resources and threatens the long-term stability of both Medicaid and Medicare. If we fail to confront the fraud aggressively, these programs will not survive for future generations in the form Americans rely upon them today. Under the leadership of President Trump and Vice President Vance, this administration is carrying out the most aggressive anti-fraud effort in American history. And I want to be clear, this is an extraordinary bust today, because these kind of operations usually take many years, sometimes a decade. This was executed with a precision and speed that is unprecedented in the history of law enforcement. And it's unprecedented now, but under Vice President Vance's leadership and President Trump's direction, we are going to normalize this speed. We're restoring accountability, strengthening oversight, prosecuting criminal networks, and protecting the integrity of our public health systems. We will not allow criminals to treat children as billing opportunities while American taxpayers foot the bill. This administration will continue rooting out fraud because every stolen dollar is a dollar taken from a child, a parent, a senior of a family who desperately needs help. We're going to protect these programs and protect vulnerable children and restore integrity to the American healthcare system. And now I want to introduce the United States Attorney Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and my thanks, where did he go, to Colin McDonald, who has led the Department of Justice's national fraud prosecution effort with a tenacity and an effectiveness that is really inspiring to all of us who are on the team. Here in Minnesota, we have the unfortunate distinction of bringing to being the place that brought to national attention the fraud committed against governments across the United States, governments that turned the other way either deliberately or negligently while it was happening under their noses. The numbers that we have here in Minnesota are enormous, but I'm happy to tell you that we have more prosecutors prosecuting fraud, more law enforcement resources investigating the fraud, and we are identifying and investigating and prosecuting fraud at a pace that is unprecedented here in this state. I am happy to report to you all, although I imagine many of you know that just a short time ago this morning, Amy Bach, cornerstone operator in the Feeding Our Future fraud, was sentenced by Judge Brazel to 500 months in prison. That's 41.6 years. While Feeding Our Future, while that fraud in and of itself was breathtaking, the truth is Feeding Our Future is only a start, and we believe it's only a small fraction of the fraud that is actually ongoing here in the state of Minnesota. And I can say so, Secretary Kennedy and Dr. Oz, it's my pledge to you that we're going to do our best to deter future thefts from your department and from your agency, to recover as much of the losses as we possibly can, and to put the thieves here in Minnesota into prison. And with that, I give you Chairman Ferguson.
Good afternoon. When President Trump said he wanted an all-of-government approach to fighting fraud, he meant it. He wants us to stop fraud by preventing money from going out the door, and he wants fraudsters swiftly brought to justice. And that's why he created the Anti-Fraud Task Force and put Vice President Vance in charge of it, to coordinate both arms of the anti-fraud campaign. Today is about bringing justice to the fraudsters at an unprecedented pace, and the whole country owes tremendous gratitude to the Acting Attorney General, to Assistant Attorney General Colin McDonald, to the U.S. Attorney Rosen, to the Deputy FBI Director Rhea for today's indictments, and also to the Healthcare Fraud Strike Force that was sent here in Minnesota. And I just want to reiterate what was said earlier, having met some of the prosecutors today. The work done at the speed at which it was done is unprecedented, and because of Attorney General Blanche and Colin McDonald, this is going to become the new norm for American fraud prosecutions. We saw last week an example of keeping money in the agency thanks to Administrator Oz and Kim Brandt. The task force helped keep billions of dollars in HHS rather than going out the door to fund fraud. And this week, the other arm of the pincher becomes apparent, with fraudsters who took money from the American people getting their just desserts. That is all about restoring deterrence. And restoring deterrence is important for two reasons. First, this is how we have to save these programs. Fraud is going to bleed our social programs dry. All of these programs are made possible by the most generous country in the world and the most generous people in the world, Americans, turning over trillions of their hard-earned dollars to fund social programs to help their families, their friends, and their neighbors through hard times. If fraudsters get to siphon off that money and put it into their own pockets, these programs, like Secretary Kennedy just said, will not survive in the form to which we are all accustomed. And Americans who've paid in expecting these programs to be around in the future will have doubts about whether they will be. So stopping fraud is how we save these programs. And no matter what your party identity is, that has to be one of our goals, saving programs by stopping fraud. The second reason that deterrence is so important is that all of our programs are built for a high-trust society. We didn't set up these programs with layers and layers and layers of anti-fraud redundancy because we set it up for a people who are accustomed to be able to trust their neighbors, their families, and their friends to do the right thing, to be honest, and not to try to bilk their fellow Americans by raiding these programs. It's become clear that that social trust has been diminished and that people have taken advantage of these programs. Deterrence is how we restore social trust. It's how we have Americans believing in one another again, believing in their government, believing in these programs, and that social trust is necessary for the entire American experiment to work. Like the Assistant Attorney General said, today's work is just the beginning. The Vice President, at President Trump's direction, is working incredibly hard every day to fight fraud in every agency, and DOJ to stop the fraud after it happens, arrest and prosecute the fraudsters. And I think today makes very clear to every fraudster, if you somehow get money that goes out the door that doesn't belong to you, the FBI is going to find you, put you in handcuffs, and prosecutors are going to throw you in jail. Again, I'm very grateful to the acting Attorney General and his incredible team, including the strike force that sent prosecutors from all over the country to achieve today's results. President Trump promised justice, and today DOJ is delivering. With that, I'll turn it over to Administrator Oz.
Thank you, Andrew. I want us to think back to what life looked like here in Minnesota a year ago, because that's when we started hearing there were concerns in this state about programs that had been built to provide services that historically had been given by families to their family members who are struggling. Kim Brandt, who's standing behind me, received a phone call, and her team began to work with Minnesota, trying to understand some concerns that were raised, suspicious billing that didn't seem to make a lot of sense. But Minnesota, Department of Health here, said they had it handled. They were going to take care of it. And we didn't hear back from them until the last week of August at a conference, at an event around that conference. There was a comment made by someone who worked in that organization here in Minnesota that they actually didn't have it handled, and there were significant problems that had gotten so out of hand that panic was setting in. And it was at that point that we re-engaged the process and realized that there were programs that had been created here with massive spending that had increased so rapidly that there's no way to save the program. The Housing Stabilization Program, which takes care of people who are struggling with homelessness or substance abuse and many other reasons why they may need housing, especially in a place like Minnesota where in the cold that can be lethal, needed that program to survive. We are all up here because we love these programs. Medicaid is the fundamental payer of last resort for our most needy, most vulnerable citizens. And when we're unable to keep these programs alive because of fraudsters, it hurts all of us deeply. And that's what happened here in Minnesota. Housing Stabilization Program, which had gone from a tiny little program to over $100 million of spending just to find someone on the streets a place to stay, which had been doubling in its expenditures annually, was shut down. Now, these are not the outcomes that we desire, but when you have to force a shutdown, it's an issue. Now, along that way, Nick Shirley, stand up. Nick Shirley, just noticed standing there, came and started doing videos. I want to call out the folks who are angry and frustrated about this. Thank you, Nick. Who want to perhaps if you want to serve, come join us. But if you can't serve, do what you can to shine a light on these cases. And with lots of folks beginning to tell us more and more of the different clues that we were able to put into a larger quilt to understand the magnitude of the catastrophe happening here in Minneapolis and in Minnesota in general, we began to take action. Now, I want to point out that a lot of this started during COVID. If you're asking how and why, COVID led to a general abandonment of principles around protecting these programs. The corruption that ensued grew rapidly. Total Medicaid spending has increased by 50%. Since the start of COVID, 50% increase. Spending on prescription medications quadrupled in the last 6 years. Now, the president can work hard, and he has, to deal with fraud, and he made the most favored nation drug pricing a reality because it's going to save the American people $600 billion. But you cannot keep up with fraud if we're not actually getting it at the root cause of it, which is when states do not police their own systems. And so because COVID caused a lack of oversight, and because agencies like mine were gutted in their ability to provide program integrity, we have allowed this monstrous, outrageous increase in spending, which does not benefit anybody, to increase. The 15 arrests today, netting $90 million, is a very important symbol because it's a shot across the bow. And we've all going to say this in our different ways, but I'm telling you, if you're a fraudster, do not walk away from this press conference. Run, because we are coming after you. We have lots of weapons to be able to use in order to accomplish that. The kinds of reprehensible behavior that we've identified with individuals bribing parents to lie that their children have autism, will carry that diagnosis for the rest of their lives. As a physician, that bothers me to my core. Not only are we selling our licenses as doctors when we allow this to happen, we're selling our souls, and there were doctors involved in some of these issues as well. It's rampant failure of this program is addressable, but we've got to be able to deal with it from within. There's a whistleblower. Her first name is Faye. She's on Capitol Hill today, testifying, I believe. But she's spoken to me about the fact that there was a general fear within the health agency here of being called the racist. A fear that you'd be politically inappropriate, politically incorrect, and that's fear is what stifled much of the action that should have taken years ago and taken place in an effort to prevent why we're here today. But we will keep coming back and we will keep helping. So let me announce a few things that we are doing specifically on the Secretary Kennedy's leadership at HHS within CMS. We have deferred, as many of you know, $350 million to the state of Minnesota based on two sequential reports from the state of its spending over the last 2 quarters. This is all, again, money that we are going to defer because our job is to protect the federal taxpayer. And as Minnesota is able to justify some of these expenses, we will discuss these. We've also asked for a revalidation of all of the high-risk providers. Again, these are providers providing services for the kinds of things like driving someone to the office or carrying the groceries upstairs, things that, again, your family would often do for you. These of the 5,600 people who are being revalidated, the state has told us as recently as May 7th that only 40% have responded, rather 40% have not responded, or their responses are clearly inadequate. We believe that by the end of this month, which is the deadline, that half of these providers may no longer be allowed to provide services. That is a lot of people doing things to other human beings that are not supposed to have been able to do them. Again, that is the humanitarian risk that we're facing. We're here to fix these problems. We love these programs, but we're going to crush the fraudsters who threaten with corruption the foundation of the social safety that we have built in this wonderful nation over the last 60 years since the foundation of Medicaid and Medicare. We're going to make as many visits as we need to Minnesota. I've been here. I'll come back. So is everyone else on this panel. And my colleagues at OIG, DOJ, FBI, and many others share our passion. Chris, to the FBI.
All right. Thank you, Administrator Oz, and thank you to the fine men and women behind me who made this day possible. I also want to specifically thank Acting Deputy Attorney General Colin McDonald. I want to thank Secretary Kennedy. I want to thank FTC Commissioner and his White House Task Force on Fraud, Commissioner Ferguson, obviously Administrator Oz, who you just heard from, and of course none of this would be possible without U.S. Attorney Rosen. Before I begin my crux of my remarks, I need your help. On the screen, you will see a subject. Depicted on the screen here of an individual who was a target of the investigation this morning. That individual is currently on the run after having jumped out of a fourth-story balcony. I want you to get a good look at him right now. You'll see him. You'll see him running here. He is currently on the run. We need your help. If you recognize this individual, if you know this individual, if you if you can provide any information related to this individual, I would encourage you to call 1-800-CALL-FBI, CALL-FBI, or go to the internet at www.tips.fbi.gov or call your local law enforcement. Obviously, this morning, our partners have gone into a lot of the details of today's charges, so I'll try not to repeat what was already said. What I would like to do, however, is speak briefly about the FBI's work in this particular fraud space. The Bureau, as you know, is one of the primary agencies responsible for investigating and rooting out healthcare fraud, with jurisdiction over both federal health insurance programs and private insurance plans. At any given time, we're running roughly 3,300 investigations related to healthcare fraud across the country. And unlike some of our work in, say, the violent crime space or the national security space, this work doesn't always get the same amount of attention or national headlines as some of those other threats we work. But let me be clear. This work is just as crucial, just as important, because healthcare fraud is not a victimless crime. It targets our most vulnerable population demographic. It costs our country hundreds of billions of dollars each year, as you heard from the folks behind me. And that drives up the cost of health care for everyone sitting in this room. It's not lost on me, and it should not be lost on any of you or anybody in the public, that every single dollar stolen through these schemes is a dollar that came from the pocket of hardworking American taxpayers. And each of those dollars were meant to help somebody in true need, not to line the pockets of shameless crooks filing false claims. Unfortunately, too often here in Minnesota lately, fraudsters have turned government programs into their own personal ATMs. What is even more troubling is these programs are meant to help our most vulnerable population demographic, the sick, the elderly, the disabled, and the unprivileged. That's why, starting last December, the FBI has surged personnel and resources here in Minneapolis, and across the country for that matter, to help in these efforts. These charges we're announcing today are a direct result of those efforts. These cases are often complex and take a lot of time and effort to investigate. Simply stated, they can take years to come to fruition. Fortunately, at the FBI, we have dedicated teams working healthcare fraud in each of our 56 field offices, not just Minneapolis. We've also got specialized teams of agents, intelligence analysts, data scientists, and forensic accountants that we deploy to support these cases, just like we deployed here in Minneapolis. So I want to personally thank our hardworking team here in Minneapolis under the leadership of SAC Chris Dotson, our financial crimes team at headquarters, and all the FBI personnel who've been part of our work here to get the results for the American people. I told you I wasn't going to repeat what was said earlier, but I'm going to repeat this because I think this is important. The speed, precision, and effort that the folks behind me and their collective agencies have shown in the last several months is truly unprecedented. In my 23 years in the FBI, I've never seen a healthcare fraud case of this breadth, depth, and scale come to fruition so quickly. It's historic, and everyone who worked this case should be extremely proud of what you accomplished in a very short amount of time. The next step, as the acting Deputy Attorney General said, is we're going to normalize that speed for cases in the future. Obviously, none of this is possible without our partner agencies represented here today, behind me, and so many others who couldn't be here today. These fraud investigations truly are a team effort, and thanks to our teamwork, these criminals will now face justice. As I close, I want to send a message to anyone still defrauding the good citizens of Minneapolis, the good citizens of the state of Minnesota, and the good citizens of the United States of America. No matter how many shell companies you have, no matter how clever or how brazen your schemes are, if you steal money from taxpayers and people in need, the FBI and our partners will pursue you relentlessly. We will find you and ensure you feel the power of American justice. Thank you.
We'll take a few questions. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask for your assessment of the way immigration agents conducted themselves here earlier this year.
I'm not going to talk about that. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. Predicated on
these prosecutions are vital, and it started here, and going back to 2022 when the prosecution started. So they're vital. The question I have is, what's the plan to go after the leadership that enabled this, the whistleblowers, going back to 2019, who's had their careers were ruined, there were state employees here, who raised this, and the administration has known about it, the government did, and have enabled it. So what's the plan to go after that?
Yeah, it's a very important question. The answer that I would give you is that the Department of Justice and our partners here on this stage, we are intent on building a fraud-fighting apparatus that's capable of reaching the full spectrum of fraud that we see wherever it is, and that there's no fraud that's too big for this team to solve, and we are intent in going wherever the facts require us to go and charge whoever we need to charge for those who are within the chain of criminal culpability. Anyone within the chain of criminal culpability, we are interested in finding you and prosecuting you. Those outside of the chain of criminal culpability, we are not. But it takes investigation, takes hard work, takes the agents and prosecutors working together to find the exact boundaries of those within the chain of criminal culpability, and that's what's underway.
But just a tiny follow-up. Is it your view that those who enabled this are part of this criminal enterprise?
I would hate to get ahead of any facts, of any investigatory findings. As I mentioned before, we are intent in uncovering and unmasking anyone involved in these schemes, including obstructing investigations into these schemes. That is our focus in this effort. Yes, sir.
You mentioned a new Medicaid fraud task force to be created here in Minneapolis. Can you explain what that entails and how it'll function and what will be different than what currently exists?
Yeah, so we're doing two things. One is we are adding strike force prosecutors to our Midwest healthcare strike force team. That will be to put additional prosecutors on the ground here in Minnesota in a dedicated fashion to work for the American people right here from Minnesota. Our healthcare fraud strike force team, their work returns $106 for every dollar we spend. The ROI is 106 to 1 for the work of these healthcare strike force prosecutors. So that's what we're doing there. The second thing is to build out a completely new Medicaid strike force team. We're going to start with 15 attorneys. Those are going to be deployable across the entirety of the United States to enter the places where Medicaid fraud is of utmost concern. That includes Minnesota. It includes California. It includes other places. But we're forming that team so that we can deploy them to the hot spots and make sure that we can reach the fraudsters across the country. Yes, sir.
With criticism of the Minnesota state governments over how this has all been handled, the Attorney General here in the state has said that his team was involved in the investigations and the charges that you described today. So can you talk about collaboration with Minnesota? And on top of that, is the federal government satisfied with what the state has done in this past legislative session to move forward with tackling fraud?
I'll start by saying that to make this work happen and to do it really well requires very good partnerships with local law enforcement, with local prosecutors. That's what will really solve this national problem, is people setting aside ego and agenda and deciding, you know what, we're actually going to do the right thing. That's what is going to be required across the country for this to work. Has the cooperation from the Minnesota individuals met that standard? No, it has not. It's fallen significantly short of the standard that we are seeking to set in terms of what a strong state and federal partnership looks like.
What about this most recent investigation?
Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, within the recent raids, first off, Paul Bloom with Fox Channel 9 here in town, I'm just wondering, within the recent raids, do you continue to see ongoing fraud being committed? Or are obviously these charges go back several years. I mean, are the crooks still trying to get away with these schemes?
Yes, what we're seeing is these schemes are active, they are ongoing, and they frequently metastasize When law enforcement shines a microscope on one area, they shift to another area. What we're seeing is that a lot of these fraudsters will actually cross-pollinate between different programs. They might be simultaneously defrauding a USDA program, Feeding Our Futures, for instance, while also simultaneously defrauding Medicaid. The fraudsters are agnostic as to whose money or what program they are defrauding. They just want our money. And so, yes, we are seeing that the fraud is ongoing, and we are interested in rooting it out.
The suspect in the ICS case you've indicted, last I heard, he fled the country. Is that still accurate?
So we are working rapidly to bring into custody everyone who is facing charges and who faces arrest warrants. I don't want to speak more specifically to any operational updates in that regard. But we are actively tracking that situation and others to make sure that folks are held accountable for the charges that have been brought. Yes, sir. The man in this video, he is a charged defendant named Mohammed Omar. Mohammed Omar is the man in this video. He is charged, one of the 15 defendants charged in the fraud cases that we have brought today. And I would encourage the public to help turn this man in to face justice for the fraud that he has perpetrated, and now to face the additional charges for seeking to flee from law enforcement and seeking to obstruct justice by virtue of his conduct today. Yes, sir.
Question for Dr. Oz.
Yes.
Are you satisfied with how the state government here is responding to what you want to see in order to lift those suspensions of the Medicaid reimbursements?
Not yet. If they had satisfied our needs, we would have released the money. So we're still waiting for the state to go through the multiple documents that were initially sent to us as part of our review of the last quarter of last year and it's a fiscal year. So last quarter of last year and the first quarter of this year to identify the many areas where there's variability. Again, what we look for very specifically, and you would do the same thing. If your normal bill is $100 and then all of a sudden it's $500, someone needs to ask what happened. Sometimes there's a reason for that. But as Secretary Kennedy pointed out, and again, it's an all-of-government approach. So we have Treasury also helping us, looking at numbers. We have OIG and DOJ giving us support. Jake Foster is here, who runs the health group there. They do a lot of heavy lifting together with our CPI unit that Kim Brandt behind me runs to make sure that we're actually looking for all the variability. But we are able to identify enough concerns that it's caused us to defer $350 million to Minnesota. And as you know, we deferred last week with the announcement with the White House Anti-Fraud Task Force with Vice President Vance that we are also deferring $1.34 billion to the state of California for the exact same kinds of problems with the documents that we're seeing.
Is it a lack of cooperation here, or are they just slow rolling this?
You know, I'm a heart surgeon. When you go out and talk to the family, the motivation is nice to hear, but you want the result. Is the patient alive? Is the bleeding stopped? We need actual numbers and factual written responses to the many areas that we've pointed to as evidence that that these documents are not satisfactory. Again, our job is to make sure that your tax dollars and the tax dollars of other Americans coming to the federal government are appropriately spent. I did not go into this job that the president appointed me to stop people who need money from getting money. We just don't want the money stolen from people. I mean, this gentleman, this picture, he's one of the reasons that the housing stabilization program in this fine state is shut down. So all the people in Minnesota who actually might need those help, you know, the folks that we always feel badly by when we're driving by and we see them homeless, especially when it's cold outside, or if they're obviously strung out on drugs, those people need our help. Because of that man, they're not going to get the help anymore. And the state shut down the program. We helped, but the state shut down. They knew it was unfixable.
A couple more questions. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you. My name is Aaron Johnson. I'm a community-based independent journalist. I'm a victim of HSS fraud. And I'm just wondering, you know, I hear all these plans to prevent it. Is there any course of action? Is there a plan to compensate victims like myself for damages? I've been housed by a single mother for the last several years until just this month I finally got help from a different program. There are people who lost a family member. Is there any plan to compensate people for damages?
So, sir, first let me say that I am hugely sympathetic to you and to anyone else who has suffered harm or injury by virtue of fraudsters taking advantage of you and exploiting you. Recently, the president issued an executive order that relates to the establishment of a fund for victims of fraud. President Trump announced that around 60 days ago. And we are actively engaged in the development of a whistleblower program that will allow people to come forward to report fraud and to ensure that people both have their voices heard when they have been damaged by fraudulent conduct and also have a chance to see some of the money that has been stolen from them be recovered. That is a focus of President Trump's administration and a tasking that he has given to the anti-fraud task force to consummate and seek to implement.
Is there a timeline to get funds back into the hands of legitimate providers? I know a lot around the state are still waiting for those funds to get unfrozen.
So that might be a question for the administrator.
Just to put numbers out there, the state has a several billion-dollar rainy day fund. So when we defer $350 million, we're not taking money out of the pockets of anybody. The money exists within the state of Minnesota. And that's why we want everyone in Minnesota to know that they are safe. And legitimate providers are our biggest allies. The people that we call to find out where the problems are folks who are actually working in these businesses who see the fraud, and they went into these jobs because they love these people and they love these professions, and they're not allowed to compete because fraudsters who have no cost of goods sold make a lot of money, and they scale up quickly and they take over like pariahs the entire system. So our biggest allies are part of the community that we want to keep supporting. It is our hope that the state of Minnesota is able to reply to the questions that we have asked. It was $250 million in the first deferment. It was $100 million in second deferment. So there tends to be a trend. We'll see if it continues. Is when we get the responses that the federal government needs and requires, and you would desire us to do if you're taxpayers, which hopefully most of you are, then you'd agree with us. That's the right time to let the money go. I am very sorry that you were caught up in this, but this is an important story that you're sharing. We didn't talk about it in much detail, but there was a man who passed away, and as was discussed by Colin, there were bills sent to the government for monitoring a dead person. I mean, I thought I'd heard it all because we're selling insurance policies through brokers to dead people, and quite a few times, unfortunately. I've never heard of us being billed for someone who died who was supposed to be monitored. But that's how egregious this has become.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you could talk, this might be more of an admin question, but when you look across the country and we're talking about normalizing the speed of these cases, are you finding that U.S. Attorney's offices either don't have the knowledge of technology or experience to get these cases off the ground as quickly as the administration would like? And how do you, in your position, make sure that all of the U.S. Attorney's offices across the country have the education, the tools that they need to bring these cases forward quickly?
The U.S. Attorney's offices are proving that they are the best that America has to offer when it comes to prosecutors and capabilities to bring investigations, to move them forward rapidly. What you see today is the result of the collaboration between the U.S. Attorney's Office here and our healthcare strike force team. Prosecutors across the country are equipped, they are resourced, and they are ready to implement the type of speed that we've seen here and to replicate that across the country. Yes, sir.
There was a pretty well-publicized exodus of prosecutors from the DOJ office a few months ago. It's hard to know how that exodus impacted this work.
I would start by saying that the work of this office in the last 5 months has been historic, both on the reactive cases that this office successfully brought to bear, but also the fraud cases that you're seeing here, bringing to fruition charges at a rate never before seen. Mr. Rosen might be able to speak with even greater specificity, but I would say that the U.S. Attorney's Office here is in fantastic hands. The leadership here has cast a vision of one that is making sure that the public is safe and secure and that taxpayer money stays in the taxpayer's pocket. And that's due to the fantastic leadership of U.S. Attorney Rosen. We'll do one final question. Yes, sir.
Max Elstruck, Minnesota Reformer. President Trump has granted clemency to numerous individuals who have stolen hundreds of millions of dollars in Medicaid funds. Can we expect Amy Bach or any of these folks to be shown the same mercy in the future?
I'll take a different question as the final question. Yes, sir.
In December, the U.S. Attorney here, Joe Thompson, estimated the fraud at, I believe it was $9 billion over, I think it was 14 different programs. Several weeks later, Governor Walz slammed that as hyperbole. I'm wondering if you could clarify if the number is in fact $9 billion or it's growing.
So I don't have the exact number, because what I do is I look at individual people committing individual crimes. And at the end of all of our work, we'll tally it all up and we'll tell you exactly how much was stolen from the American people. We're focused on individual defendants. The fraud is enormous. I wouldn't be surprised if that number is accurate or even small. But today, the collection of cases reaches 90 million in intended loss from the pockets of the taxpayer. And like I said, we're just getting going. This is not the end of the beginning. This is the beginning. Thank you all.
That was the DOJ announcing a major anti-fraud operation in Minnesota. It spans everything from Medicare to homeless services to autism services. And the DOJ officials said that that is the highest amount of charges in a Medicaid case, and all this anti-fraud and anti-autism services is up near the top. These healthcare frauds, Midwest strike forces are going to be moving in as well. Now, next, diplomacy with Cuba and Iran is still on the table. Secretary of State Marco Rubio telling reporters that the Trump administration is very focused on dealing with the two regimes.
We're very serious, we're very focused. As I told you a moment ago, in the context of Iran, the president's preference is always a negotiated agreement that's peaceful. That's always our preference. That remains our preference with Cuba. I'm just being honest with you. You know, the likelihood of that happening, given who we're dealing with right now, is not high. But if they have a change of heart, you know, we're here. And in the meantime, we'll keep doing what we need to do.
Rubio would not disclose how the administration plans to get Raul Castro to the U.S., only saying there are a lot of ways. He emphasizes that the Cuban regime has been a leading sponsor of terrorism in the region and consistently posed a threat to U.S. national security. On the issue of Iran, Rubio says President Trump has other options if a good deal can't be reached. The Secretary of State was making the comments while heading to Europe for a NATO meeting. And coming up, the Supreme Court rules that a U.S. company can sue cruise lines for using its business assets seized by Cuba's communist regime. In a separate case, the High Court declines to rule on the role of IQ scores in overturning death sentences. A former prosecutor is charged with stealing sensitive records. The case is tied to Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation on President Trump.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming. Please call or go online now. With your gift of $19 a month, we'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org.
Whispered across generations, a hidden secret unveils the essence of longevity and vitality, a timeless legend regarding energy and wonder. Rooted in ancient health wisdom, we proudly introduce Pure Tang Black Ginseng, a 100% natural organic energy drink made from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng. It takes 2,260 days and nights from seed to growth, undergoing a meticulous 9-step process of steaming and drying. Black ginseng reaches its full potency, enriched with ginsenoside RG3 and enhanced absorption efficiency. No sugar, no caffeine, no artificial ingredients. Experience the pure natural power of Pure Tang Black Ginseng. Nourish your body, strengthen your immunity, and boost your energy. To order Pure Tang Black Ginseng, please visit puretang.com.
Hi again. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of U.S. owners of Cuban property that was confiscated by Cuba's communist regime more than 65 years ago. The suit targets 4 cruise lines that brought tourists to Cuba during the brief thaw in relations during the Obama administration. By 8-1, the justices revived claims filed by a U.S. company, Havana Docks, that operated docks in the Cuban capital. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote for the court that the federal appeals court in Atlanta was wrong to dismiss the claims. The Supreme Court has declined to rule on the role of IQ scores in overturning death sentences. The High Court saying that it erred in taking up the case in the first place. The case, known as Ham v. Smith, focused on an Alabama inmate named Joseph Clifton Smith. Smith has argued he is too intellectually disabled to receive the death penalty. In 2002, the Supreme Court ruled that executing intellectually disabled individuals violated the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Smith received 5 IQ scores, 75, 74, 72, 78, and 74. Each was just above the 70-point benchmark Alabama used to determine intellectual disability. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that Smith's IQ scores didn't provide enough proof he was competent because some were within the margin of error. The Supreme Court's decision leaves the appellate court ruling in place, sparing Smith the death penalty. U.S.-bound flights with passengers who were in the Ebola-affected region of Africa must land at Dulles Airport in Virginia. That comes from the Department of Homeland Security. The CDC says staff from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will screen the arriving passengers. The CDC has invoked Title 42, a public health law that restricts entry into the U.S. during outbreaks of communicable diseases. That 30-day window began on Monday. There are nearly 600 suspected Ebola cases and nearly 150 deaths across the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. The CDC emphasized yesterday that the outbreak is of low risk to the general public here in the U.S. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked about the Ebola outbreak earlier this morning. Listen in.
Ebola, you told us 2 days ago when you stopped by the bullpen that the WHO was a little late, were your words, I think, in identifying this strain. The WHO chief has now responded. He said it might be because you don't understand the global health policy system. Do you have a response to that?
The World Health Organization has unfortunately not done well around the world. I think they failed miserably during COVID. They covered for China, and that's how we're getting out of it. That said, we're going to work with anybody who wants to fix that problem. Our number one objective on Ebola, before anything else, and we think it's terrible what's happening there to the people. We've been very involved with DRC on the peace deal with Rwanda and so forth. But our number one thing has to be, we can't have it affect the United States. We can't have Ebola cases coming here. So you saw we're now not allowing people to come in. In fact, I think we had a flight last night headed to Detroit that was diverted because we have to protect the American people. So objective number one is to make sure that Ebola never reaches the United States. Objective number two is do what we can to help the people of DRC and neighboring countries so it doesn't spread. And I think we're up to 600 confirmed cases. There are probably more. We'll learn more about it. We're providing, I think we've offered to fund the first 50 clinics that pop up and are ready to step forward. So I wish we would have gotten started on this 2 weeks ago, that the alert had gone out sooner. I also recognize that the outbreak began in a war-torn country in a very rural area that perhaps doesn't have some of the support networks that some of the other places have. But again, I want to repeat to everybody, we care about Ebola. We don't want anyone dying or being affected by Ebola. But our number one priority will always be making sure it doesn't come to the United States. That's our number one obligation.
A former Justice Department prosecutor is facing criminal charges. They relate to Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation of President Trump. Federal prosecutors say Carmen Lineberger secretly emailed sensitive investigative documents to her personal accounts. The incident allegedly occurred while she served as a senior federal prosecutor in South Florida. Lineberger is accused of disguising the files with names like chocolate cake recipe and bundt cake recipe to conceal the transmissions from government record searches. In a social media post, FBI Director Kash Patel called the investigation politicized and said the Bureau would hold accountable those who abused the public's trust. Lineberger pleaded not guilty in federal court yesterday. She faces charges including obstruction of justice, concealment of government records, and theft of government property. The Trump administration is awarding $2 billion in grants to 9 quantum computing companies. The government will take equity stakes as part of the deals, as first reported by the Wall Street Journal. The report says the Commerce Department has agreed to provide $1 billion to IBM, and Global Foundries is set to receive $375 million. Other companies, including D-Wave Quantum, Rigetti Computing, and Inflection, are expected to receive about $100 million each. Startup Dirac could receive $38 million. The investments are part of a broader push by the Trump administration to take equity stakes in companies seen as critical to the U.S. supply chain, and to counter China's dominance in key industries, including chip making. Quantum computing uses the laws of quantum mechanics to process information far faster than traditional supercomputers in complex problems. A bill designed to help inform beachgoers of shark attacks is now headed to President Trump's desk for a signature. The House approved the bipartisan measure known as Lulu's Law yesterday. It would allow state and local authorities to use wireless emergency alerts to send out notifications about unsafe water conditions after a shark attack occurs. Shark attack warnings would be eligible for alerts transmitted through the Federal Communications Commission's emergency notification system, much like severe weather alerts. Lulu's Law was inspired by Lulu Gribben, an Alabama child who was bitten by a shark in June 2024. Lawmakers say another attack involving a different victim happened several miles away, about an hour and a half prior to the attack on Lulu. She and her family were at the U.S. Capitol to celebrate the bill's passage. A $1 billion Medicaid fraud scheme under scrutiny at a Capitol Hill roundtable today. Lawmakers are weighing strategies on how to prevent fraud that's draining taxpayer dollars. NTD's Melina Weisskopf is on Capitol Hill with the highlights.
This is the kind of stuff that unwinds civilization if it's allowed to continue with impunity, as it has for many years.
Luke Rosiak, an investigative journalist at the Daily Wire, spent 2 months crunching numbers specifically focused on home health care businesses in Ohio. Now, these are businesses that are meant to provide care for sick or elderly patients, but in reality, there's no medical training required to perform these services, and there's no way to tell whether or not these services were performed at all.
Sometimes $10 million over the last couple of years, like millions of dollars a year. It's a lot of money. And I found that a lot of the companies were owned by people with huge red flags, things like criminal records or tax liens against them.
So far, he's found around 300 shell companies operating out of 7 mostly empty office buildings. And during his reporting, he visited some of those office buildings and made calls to those who were supposed to be in charge, only to face threats against himself and his family.
When I talked to Aliu Conte about what he did in exchange for that $100,000 a month and his 30-plus arrests, he said, I was just too dumb to know what is law. And then he threatened my family for asking what he did in exchange for $100,000. There are basically mafia dons that are getting rich and buying up, they're sending money abroad. And it's just, the scale of this is enormous. Even the ambassador from Somalia to the United Nations had a home health care company in Ohio.
Lawmakers warn that the fraud that has been uncovered so far in Minnesota and Ohio is just the tip of the iceberg. And one congresswoman tells me as far as how to deal with it, starting with the data is a crucial first step, but in the long term, institutional changes are needed.
Create systems that require transparency. When we require verification, like we've been working on this Congress, to make sure that states are checking periodically to make sure that there's a real person receiving those benefits, that that person is a citizen of the United States of America. Those types of checks and balances need to be in place to continue to exist regardless of who's in the White House.
Luke told me that his investigation was data-driven, and it led him to notice trends that were also found in the Minnesota daycare fraud scheme.
People didn't really care because it was other people's money. There were people coming here from Somalia that have never paid taxes and may not feel invested in America, and they thought, well, why not have the government pay my spouse $100,000?
The Republican candidate for Ohio Governor Vivek Ramaswamy this week made a vow to make a priority of rooting out fraud in the state.
And to put that money back in your pocket where it belongs, through copay assistance,
through bringing down premiums, through expanding the value of your health savings accounts. That's why we're here today.
As for congressional action, the House Oversight Committee has launched a task force dedicated to fraud prevention. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. I'm Kevin Hogan. Thanks for watching.